Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans.
From the Manston Centre are being abandoned by the Home Office on the streets of London.
And have you been teased because of your accent? I have. A new survey says almost half of us have, with a quarter of us experiencing it in a workplace setting.
Yeah, I've had it as well. Let us know if that's happened to you. Tell us what you think about any of the big stories of the day. We love to hear from you. We are the People's Channel. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, a very good morning to you and welcome to the programme. Our top story this morning, the Bank of England will unveil its latest interest rate rise today, with markets expecting it to rise by 0.75%. That will be the biggest hike since Black Wednesday 30 years ago.
The move, which would bring interest rates to 3%, is a response to skyrocketing inflation rates, which reached a new 40-year high in September.
And the move will be especially worrying for homeowners, with those on tracker mortgages facing an almost £900 increase to their payments. Well, for the latest on what today's announcement might bring, we're joined by Simon French, the chief economist at Panmure Gordon. Good morning to you. So the headlines seem alarming in the sense that this is the biggest hike that we've seen in 3 decades. And yet this is clearly an attempt to try and get a grip of the high inflation that the country is experiencing. Is this the right move, do you think, from the Bank of England?
It's the right move, but let's not kid ourselves. It's not the move they want to be making. This is inflation that's come largely from, not exclusively, but largely from events in international oil markets. And they're trying to bring inflation down by, bluntly, trying to push up UK inflation. That's a pretty uncomfortable mix for an politically independent central bank that's making decisions that are intensely political, but with inflation running at 10% and probably going to increase further up towards 11% before it starts to come down, they really have no choice in this scenario.
Will it be 0.75%? A lot of betting on this.
Yes.
The Fed was 0.75%.
That's right. All the major central banks have been going with that number. The market sees a 97% likelihood. It would be a big surprise if they deviated from that path. Although, to be fair to the Bank of England, given the volatility in the last 6-7 weeks we've seen in the UK economy, to actually get the market to be so consensus on a single path is actually quite an achievement. They've managed to do that at a time when, in the immediate aftermath of the budget, back in the end of September, we were seeing 1.5% increases in bank rates. So half that level, but the fact that the market's coalesced around a number, no mean feat, actually.
OK, a bit of stability in that sense. We know that this autumn statement is going to be now, I think, 17th of November.
That's right, yes.
That meant that the Monetary Policy Committee couldn't see the OBR forecast, which was so important in trying to control volatility when we had the trust budget. How much will that be a problem, do you think, in all of this?
Not a problem per se, as in they meet again in 6 weeks' time. But what they will do is they'll want to minimise the amount of surprises, because what they don't want to do is surprise the market, take a different path, either raise by less or raise by more, and set hares running when things are going to change in 2 weeks' time. We don't know the magnitude. We don't know how much Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are going to change what's known as the fiscal mix, tax and spending in the UK, which is very, very relevant for what happens on interest rates. We don't know that amount. So to some extent, the Bank of England have to be in a holding pattern, minimise the uncertainty, and then meet again in 6 weeks' time and respond to that information. The sequencing is not perfect, but it's not terrible either. Okay.
Front page of the Times is suggesting today another windfall tax on the energy companies. Would you be surprised if they don't go down that route?
I'd be surprised if they don't go down that route.
It'd be popular too.
This is the thing. Look, I think when he was Chancellor, Rishi Sunak didn't want to do a windfall tax because he wanted to encourage a lot of the oil and gas companies to do investment, both in existing oil and gas capacity, but also on renewables. But politically, he's very exposed. I think in an environment where even some of the oil and gas majors are saying this is not going to change our investment decisions. If you look at all the other politically unpopular things he might have to do to try and cover the gap that has emerged in the public finances, the windfall tax feels one of the least painful routes.
So the announcement we expect from the Bank of England around midday, there'll be lots of people on tracker mortgages. I think there's something, a staggering number, 1.5 million on tracker mortgages in this country. They'll be looking closely. What could it mean for them?
Well, almost immediate pass-through. They'll get the dreaded either letter or email from their bank. It's funny, isn't it, how banks are very quick to pass that through and less keen through the other side of the ledger, which is savers who may, of course, benefit from this increase. But we mustn't lose sight also that over the last decade, the mortgage structure, the type of mortgages that people are taking out has fundamentally changed. If we'd been having this conversation a decade ago, 80% of Britons with a mortgage had a tracker, so an immediate pass-through, an immediate bit of pain following an interest rate hike. It's the other way around today. It's actually only 20% of mortgage holders who have that. That's not to diminish the pain that they will feel, but for a lot of people, actually, it'll wait until they have to refinance their fixed rate, which may be a couple of years down the path. And the hope is that we'll have more stable, if like, cost of living backdrop and certainly interest rate backdrop for them to remortgage into.
Do you think more people might switch then to tracker mortgages in the hope that eventually they might come down in the next 5 years?
Well, certainly in the last few weeks, as we've seen great volatility on the prices that some of the lenders are offering, the aftermath of the mini-budget, it was up to 6.5% towards 7%. And it made a lot of sense, actually, for people in the short term to go onto trackers to see how this pans out. And actually, that would have been a smart decision, because had you fixed 4 or 5 weeks ago at 6.5%, you'd be now looking at the market that's starting to offer things with 5%, potentially a little bit lower, and those are looking much more attractive. I think that in times of market dislocation, actually, giving yourself the flexibility was actually quite a smart decision at the time.
Fantastic. Simon French, a little bit of mortgage advice in there as well. Chief Economist for Panmure Gordon, thank you. Well, for more on how the current economic climate is impacting everything from charity donations to property prices, Theo Jakumba has been speaking to small businesses.
Meeting the needs of cancer patients in hospital, the Lewis Foundation in Northamptonshire delivers gift bags to patients in oncology wards. For charities like this one, cash is king. What impact will an interest rate rise mean for them?
Because what we're finding is donations have significantly decreased, especially since the interest rates keep rising. And I'll say over the last, 3 to 4 months, we've noticed a drop of about 90% in our donations. And for us as a charity that are providing these gift packs and our service for free to patients, that has a financial impact on us. Our concern is long-term. If this doesn't get sorted out, then people like us cannot provide the service to the patients, and they really need our support.
It's not just charities, homeowners and potential buyers are facing increasing costs too. Interest rates are reflected by the mortgage rate offered by lenders, which makes mortgages more expensive for borrowers. So, should people be worried?
With obviously interest rates going up and more importantly the level of stress testing going up, and by stress testing I mean the rate at which the lenders will assess the affordability, shall we say, of prospective buyers, that naturally of course that's going to lead to a price correction. Not necessarily a crash, but a price correction. So I'd say my message to homeowners in today's market is that they just need to be a little bit more open and realistic to the true value of their property moving forward, because of course if the affordability isn't there for the buyer, then the transactions aren't going to be able to happen.
Meanwhile, back at the Lewis Foundation, demand is increasing. They're now delivering to 16 hospitals, including Northampton General.
And we've found that there is a real need for adult cancer patients as they go through treatment. A lot of people can't afford to buy the basic things that keeps them going, like a book to pass the time or their toiletries that they need whilst they're in hospital. But they also want the company and someone to spend time talking with them too. And it's not something that the NHS can provide. So we provide this additional service, and what we've found is that people really need it, and that has led to our charity growing as much as it has over the last 6 years.
At a time when household and business finances are under pressure, a higher rate will make it more expensive to borrow and encourage people to save, as the Bank of England attempts to curb high inflation. Theo Jakumba, GB News.
Now, in a significant U-turn, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will attend the COP27 climate summit next week.
Yeah, he'd previously opted not to go, instead to focus on Britain's growing domestic problems.
But it comes amid reports he's drawing up plans with his Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, to extend the windfall tax on energy companies, part of a plan to plug the £50 billion budget black hole.
Political commentator Albion Amankona joins us now.
Good morning to you, Albie. What do you make of this suggestion then? Something that the Labour Party have been keen on for a while, and it's going after the big money that is being produced in the energy sector at the moment.
I think it's probably going to be something which is quite likely to happen. If the reports are to be believed, there's a £50 billion black hole in the public finances, and the Chancellor and the Prime Minister want to fill that black hole either by using tax rises and also efficiency savings in public services. So essentially, spending cuts. A windfall tax will be seen as a relatively politically easy decision to make because, of course, the energy companies are making so much money because of the energy cost inflation that we are seeing. So I'd be very surprised if we didn't see an extension of the windfall tax in the autumn statement on November the 17th.
The government stealing the Labour Party's clothes, of course, because they've resisted this energy tax again and again. And here we are, we're going to have this financial statement on November the 17th, and I'm sure it'll be the centrepiece. Some suggestion also, Albie, that there could be a windfall tax on the bank's profits because they are making eye-watering sums too.
Well, of course, but windfall taxes, I think we've got to remember, it's not just a Labour idea. Of course, you may remember that in 1981, Margaret Thatcher put a windfall tax on oil and gas, and indeed the banking companies as well. So this is not some sort of left-wing idea. It really is a way that governments can raise tax revenue in a relatively politically easy way without putting it on to ordinary consumers, and it can be seen to be something which is quite a popular move.
Yeah, but of course, we're also familiar, aren't we, with the recent Trussonomic rhetoric around anti-growth coalitions. And this is about as anti-growth as it gets in terms of frightening off investment. And the big fear is you do this every time you're in a political scrape and you just dissuade people from being in the UK, whether that's the banks or whether that's the big energy companies. That is a risk.
Of course, this is a concern. One of the things that you will get opponents of windfall tax saying is that one of the reasons why people like investing in the UK is because they can predict what the tax system might be. And if there are all of these unpredictable changes based on a government's perception of when or when not a company does make a windfall, that can make tax planning a much more difficult affair for businesses and therefore make the UK a less attractive place to invest. So this is not going to be a silver bullet. This is not something which the government can keep coming back to. So they will have to figure out in the longer term how they are going to balance the books without raising taxes necessarily on businesses or on individuals. And of course, that's what Liz Truss wanted to do. She wanted to focus on growing the economy. And we've not heard very much from Rishi Sunak about how he wants to do that.
The £7 billion BP made in the last quarter, it's jaw-dropping, isn't it? £7 billion. So if that's repeated over the year, £30 billion profit. They are, I'm a man who does not think you should be taxing too much, too often, but they are ripe for a windfall tax. They really are.
Yes, of course, but also let's remember, Andrew, that the energy companies are already taxed more than ordinary companies. So windfall tax, I think a windfall tax is something which we're going to see on November the 17th, but these companies are already taxed an awful lot of money compared to other companies, and it could dissuade investment. So this is not something which the government can keep coming back to in the more medium to long term.
What about this screeching U-turn from the Prime Minister to attend Sharm el-Sheik's COP27 this weekend? Andrew's laughing. I mean, was this because Boris is basically threatening to grandstand him and outdo him? Or was this the King hosting his own little reception on Friday, again, basically quietly showing his own sympathy for the cause? Does it make him look weak, or is this out of conviction?
I think it is almost certainly something to do with a certain former Prime Minister in an interview on Sky News saying that he was going to COP27 himself. Of course, the next morning we heard from Rishi Sunak himself through a tweet that he was going to be going to the COP27 conference in Sharm el-Sheikh. So I think it was probably all to do with Boris Johnson. But I would say that I was actually a little bit surprised to hear that Rishi Sunak wasn't going to be going to COP27 in the first place, because I don't know if you recall that throughout the leadership contest, it it was really Rishi Sunak who was talking about the environment a lot more. He was talking about how his daughters were really passionate about the environment and how he wanted to leave the planet in a better state when he left office than when he started. So I think maybe if he'd stuck to his guns from the beginning and said he was going to COP27 from the start, he wouldn't have ended up doing this U-turn. So I think perhaps he should actually stick to his convictions rather than doing things which are going to be politically popular.
Although yesterday we did hear, didn't we, that he's set to drop pretty much any of the pledges that he made during the leadership contest, and I suppose you can understand in the context of everything that's going on.
20 at the last count, I think he's dropping. But it's definitely Boris. That's why he's going. There's no doubt about it. That Boris would have been grandstanding and hogging the headlines, and Rishi would have looked. But to give Rishi a good opportunity, of course, to talk to the President of the United States, and he can also have a word in the ear of Mr Macron, can't he, the French President, about what the hell they're going to do about the Channel migrant crossings.
Well, of course, this will be Rishi Sunak's first real foray onto the world stage as a global leader. Of course, he was the Chancellor before, very much a domestic position. So he's quite untested on the international stage. It'll be interesting to see how he interacts with the other leaders, whether or not he'll bring up that President Biden got his name wrong, whether or not he will bring up the migrant crisis with the French. There's a lot going on the international stage at the moment, and this will really be Rishi Sunak's first test as a leader of one of the world's leading nations on the global stage.
Albie, I thought about the Albanian comments yesterday from the Albanian Prime Minister saying, hang on a minute, all of this rhetoric, anti-Albanian rhetoric, sort of crime-related, is not based on fact. How about having a proper conversation, talking about visas with Albania in much a similar way to Germany? Is that something Suella Braverman needs to consider in all of this?
Well, of course, Suella Braverman's focus is on UK Home Affairs, and one of the things that we have seen, of course, this year is 12,000 mostly Albanian men cross the Channel. I think it was up from a couple of hundred just a couple of years ago. And obviously, Albania is not a war-torn country. These men are not, fleeing from persecution. They're fleeing from a country which wants to ascend to the European Union. So I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Albie, the argument, though, with the visas is it makes it easier to send them back in many ways.
Yes, of course. Look, I think there's certainly more to do on the whole issue of the migrant crisis, not just with the issues to do with Albanians crossing Channel, but indeed with the processing that's going on. I think only 4% of migrants were processed from 2021 to this year, which means 96% of them are still in those hotels. Millions of pounds are being spent on them each day, and we don't know whether or not they are genuine asylum seekers or not. So the Albania issue aside, there's a lot more that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister need to do on this issue to solve it in a way that the British people will be content with.
All right, well, that's Albie Anancona. Thanks for joining us, political commentator and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism.
The time is 6:17. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning. Asylum seekers were reportedly left at London's Victoria Station on Tuesday after being taken out of the Manston Processing Centre in Kent. The Guardian says the group of 11 men were driven to the capital as part of a larger group. Hundreds of people had been moved out of the Manston facility amid concerns it had become dangerously overcrowded.
A new report examining the emergency response to the Manchester Arena bombing is going to be published today. It will look at whether any inadequacies contributed to individual deaths. 22 people were killed, hundreds injured in a suicide attack at an Ariana Grande concert in 2017.
The Foreign Secretary will warn allies that Vladimir Putin's plunging the world's poorest further into despair. Speaking at a meeting of G7 foreign ministers in Germany, James Cleverly will stress the need to work together amid economic insecurity driven by the war in Ukraine. So, the name Michael Mosley, Dr. Michael Mosley, does it mean anything to you? Are you into podcasts and self-help?
I'm an avid reader of my newspaper, of course, the other day.
Yes.
And Michael Mosley's books often grace our health pages because he's full of ideas about how to keep fit, what you eat, what sort of exercises you do. And he is the reason why, even before I came here this morning, I was thrusting in the front room with my medicine ball.
We do-
5 kilograms. It's got handles on either side, so I'm swinging this way, swinging that way. It's good for the glutes. It's good for the tummy.
Yeah.
Good for the chest.
And how long do you do that for? Because his whole concept is just 30 seconds of 30 minutes, sorry. Of
no, well, I don't do it for 30 minutes, I'm afraid, but I do 100. But then and if his advice, if you see an escalator and you can walk up the stairs.
Yes.
If there's a lift at a tube station, I walk up the stairs.
So the idea is just one thing. If
Yeah.
you do just one thing and 30 minutes of it, it can have life-changing implications. So the quote this morning is dancing for 5 to 10 minutes every day can change your life.
Do a bit of ABBA then.
I can do that in the kitchen with the children when I'm serving them their supper. I don't know. I like the idea that if you look at a staircase, it's just getting on the first step. You know, if you think about the whole task, sometimes it's too daunting, but just one thing, one step can set you on your way. So let us know. Is this something that speaks to you? Is this something that you do? We want to hear your tales this morning. Are you a big fan of Dr. Michael Mosley? So after the break, we'll get all the details of the latest GB News People's Poll. 58% of people say the country has lost control of its borders. But first, here's your forecast.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGivern here with the forecast. More rain for some of us today. Brighter skies for many compared with yesterday, but there are further showers coming our way. And for the southeast, some more persistent rain because Wednesday's system, well, the low pressure at least is clearing to the north, but its lingering weather front is sticking around for some time across East Anglia and the southeast. And as a result, it's a wet start for London, East Anglia, southeast England. And that rain will come and go, I think, through the day. It could cause some issues on the roads because 20, 30, perhaps 40 millimetres of rain accumulating through the day. Well, that might be troublesome. Further west, brighter skies, yes, but further showers pushing through, particularly across western parts of the UK. I think northeast Scotland faring well for sunshine and predominantly drier weather, and all areas feeling a bit cooler compared with recent days, 10 or 11 in the north and 13 or 14 further south. Now, the showers, if anything, get going a bit more during the evening and overnight, especially across parts of Wales into the southwest of England and then later across southern counties of England. Hail and thunder, always a possibility, gusty winds as well, and the risk of some, well, high rainfall totals in a short space of time across southern counties of England. Elsewhere, clearer skies are moving in, lighter winds, and as a result, Friday starts off colder compared with recent mornings. In fact, you probably have to go back to the second week of October to see a morning as cold as this. A touch of frost in places, -3 or -4 Celsius in some sheltered spots in the north. But a bright start, plenty of blue skies out there. Once any early showers have cleared from the south, there will be further showers coming in from the northwest, but actually a decent amount of sunny spells in between those showers. And it's a colder day compared with recent days. Again, you have to go back to the beginning or the second week of October, but temperatures will start to edge upwards this weekend as further areas of low pressure move in. Wet and windy on Saturday, blustery showers on Sunday, highs of 14 Celsius.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's Isabel and Andrew with you this morning. The time is 6:24, still to come on the programme this morning.
Have you ever been teased for your accent? Well, at 6:45, we'll find out how often it happens and which accents people make fun of the most.
Yeah, and do you find it funny or do you find it offensive? Because I think you can have a little light-hearted banter. People take the mick out of my accent, and I love an accent. I really can't help but copy people's accents.
Yeah, when I worked in Birmingham, a lot of people there took the mick out of my accent, which I thought was ironic because the Birmingham accent, arguably,
yes, it's stronger.
A little stronger than mine.
But yeah, some people are very sensitive about it, and you have to kind of check. But I love an accent, to clarify. But let us know, do you like or loathe being teased, or have you never been teased for your accent? Let us know. Then just before 8 o'clock, we'll be asking the chair of the Labour Party and the former Shadow Chancellor, Anneliese Dodds, about the upcoming hike to interest rates and what her party would do to try and protect homeowners.
Get in touch in all the usual ways. Email gbviews@gbnewsuk or tweet @gbnews. A report about the inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombing response will be published today.
The inquiry has heard evidence concerning how prepared each emergency service was to respond to an act of terrorism.
Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has spoken to two of the survivors of that terrible attack.
I think because it impacted me at such a young age, seeing as I was only 11 when it occurred, my whole childhood kind of was like ruined in a way. Like I never lived a normal life from that moment. So for me, I can't really remember a time before, what I was like before that. So all I can remember is me suffering from PTSD and anxiety and dealing with the consequences of that night. So I don't think I'll ever get over it or will ever be able to, because it's such a part of my life now from being impacted at such a young age.
How does it make you feel when she says things like that?
I find it upsetting. She almost missed her childhood like a lot of people who were there, and mistakes were made that night and people need to own up. It's just been very difficult from my perspective getting any sort of counselling, but from Amelia is still under the hospital. So she's still under the CAMS 5 years later, and she's now got anorexia. And she's been diagnosed with severe PTSD. She's on lots of medication. So every day is a struggle, isn't it? But every day, obviously, we think of the 22 families. We're very close to the families as well.
Do you think the inquiry is going to bring you any kind of peace? Your mum obviously mentioned there the effects that it's had on you. Do you think that's going to help at all?
I think that through the inquiry, I'll be able to actually see where people went wrong and what could have been prevented before that horrible situation took place, and what should have happened after to ensure not only our safety but every single person's safety there. So I think from that perspective of actually finally letting it out of who did mess up on the night is really important to not only me, but I imagine all the families and all the other survivors as well, just to finally have that kind of knowledge of why what happened and what went wrong, really.
That's the Arena Bomb Inquiry report, which will be out later. Now, after the break, we're going to be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Claire Pearsall.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel.
And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 6:31. Time to bring you up to date on the latest headlines.
The Bank of England is expected to unveil the biggest interest rate rise since Black Wednesday amid rising inflation. Monetary Policy Committee members are predicted to make a decision today to push up the bank's base rate by 0.75 percentage points.
A new survey has revealed the issues Brits are most worried about in the NHS. Long waiting times are top of people's concerns, with poor emergency response times also high on the list.
The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is under increasing pressure. This is over her handling of the migrant crisis. Her claim that there's an invasion of England by people crossing the Channel has been labelled crazy by Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick also confirmed the government's facing potential legal action over conditions at Manston Asylum Centre in Kent.
Okay, it's arguably my favourite time in the programme. So when we get to go through the papers, and it means you at home don't have to do it. So grab yourself a cup of tea and join us. This morning we have the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the former Conservative Advisor, Claire Pearsall. Welcome to both of you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Freddie, let's start with you, because all eyes on the Bank of England at midday today, and set to be the biggest rate rise since Black Wednesday, which I'm shocked to read was 30 years ago, 1992. And you've gone for the front of the Telegraph on this one.
Front Telegraph, yeah, bank set for biggest rate rise since Black Wednesday, says Telegraph, and it is, of course, a little bit concerning every time there's one of these jumps, but we are just following rather sort of palely after the Fed, which has been quite aggressive in its rate rises. I think the good news, which is always disguised in headlines about mortgages, is that the futures are not looking so bad. So in the Truss calamity, mortgage futures, where people were thinking it could go up to 7, 8, 9% possibly. It's looking more like it's going to be 5, 6, which is high by modern standards, but not historically high. I think it's about where it was when I first got a mortgage.
And if you think, Freddie, going back 30 years, Black Wednesday, when interest rates soared, we had mortgage rates of 15%.
Yes.
Staggering. And people were literally handing their keys back to building societies. Repossessions soared, and the Tories never regained their reputation for economic competence. Well, not for a very long time.
Well, that's right. And Nationwide here are saying they expect up to a 30% decline in the housing market, which is significant. But I think the real fears about the housing market collapse are not as bad as they were a few weeks ago. So I think it doesn't sound good, but I think the overall news is slightly healthier on the mortgages anyway.
And falling house prices, they're good if people are trying to get on the property ladder.
Very good for young people.
Or size up.
Yeah.
So So, you know, there is some good news in there. And savers, I suppose, when's that going to be passed on to savers? At the moment, the banks seem to be pocketing it all.
Yeah. A bit slow about that.
Savers never feel the benefits of saving.
Anything.
I've learned this the hard way.
You just spend it.
Yeah.
OK, Claire, let's take a look at the Mirror. Your favourite story, Andrew.
Oh, my God, I'm glad you've picked this. What is he thinking of?
Well, himself,
Yes.
I think, is the only thing. He is the man who has managed to unite the nation
Yes.
in our hatred behind him.
Yeah.
I think that the vanity project of Matt Hancock is something that, going through this year, is quite something. Given everything that we've been through, for him to be so blind to that is outstanding. And his assertion that this isn't about him, this is about charity.
Yeah.
It's about raising awareness, and he'll be able to deal with his constituents from the jungle.
Can he now?
And it's quite interesting, actually, in the Mirror, they've been talking to one of the producers who said that absolutely isn't true. He won't be able to just nip off and clear some emails, have a chat with Mrs Miggins from down the road.
I don't think they're allowed to have a phone in the jungle,
They're not,
are they?
and it's only emergency contacts that will be able to get through. So I think we can all see what that means.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not
Lambert
just a
Opek was on yesterday morning, and he was saying, because he's a pal of Matt's, and he said he had it on good authority that if there was a crisis in his constituency or whatever it might be, there would be a break clause in his contract and he would be able to come back. And he said he feels like he's the only man in the country defending Matt Hancock. But he says, should he go back to West Suffolk and spend the rest of his life, you know, wringing his hands for what happened? I mean, he didn't do deliberate missteps.
I just feel really uncomfortable with somebody who is an elected representative, who is meant to be in the House of Commons, looking
Boris
after his
Johnson was over in the Dominican Republic 2 weeks ago.
I have views on that as well. I mean, I just think this is wrong. I'm glad he's lost the whip for it, but I think his constituents deserve better. They need somebody that's working for them. He is earning a good salary being a Member of Parliament, and now is just disappearing off to further his own career.
And Kev, just at the very time when the preliminary stages of the COVID public inquiry are beginning, he's going to be a major part of that inquiry.
Yes.
And there he is, doing ridiculous bush tucker trials down under to earn a fee of somewhere between 350 and 400,000.
And it's really unclear when he says he's making a donation to two particular charities.
Yeah.
It's very unclear what that donation
Yeah.
actually will be.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be near the 350,000 he's earning. So I think there's a lot of questions. People in the House of Commons are really quite unhappy.
Freddie, are you outraged?
I like that he said he wanted to show us his human side, because I think we've seen rather a lot of Matt Hancock's rather too human side. I think, well, I mean, I'd rather he stayed in the jungle forever, actually.
One-way ticket. OK, fair enough.
It's gonna. I think it's the end of him. Actually, I think the Tory leadership will finish him off. I don't think he'll get the whip back.
Well, he's part of meme culture, though, isn't he? And so there might be the sort of ironic, let's get him to do all the challenges, and then he will be so sort of richly... The British public loves to torture people and then decide to forgive them.
Well, I'm going to vote for him to do all the bush
Yes.
Yeah.
So
every single one.
He's going to get every single
but
one.
he might become a huge star off the back of this with ordinary people, because he's going to be grilled,
But
isn't
I think
he?
ordinary people will also look at this and say, we're going to punish him.
Yes, that's
And then we're going to ignore him when he comes
Yes.
back. And I don't
Yes.
think he's going to get quite the celebrity return he believes he's going to.
His girlfriend's flown out there to keep him company.
Has she? Gina Collard-Delangelo.
What do you think his kids must think? Long-suffering children, Dad humiliating us again.
Oh.
Dad dancing, this is worse than Dad dancing.
I mean, it really is. I mean, my child, whose birthday it is today, happy birthday, James.
Oh, happy birthday,
14.
James.
He is embarrassed whenever I appear on a programme like this. I think if I was going out into the jungle, he would just be dying of
he would disown
embarrassment.
you.
And he would disown me. So I think, poor Matt Hancock's kids have been through quite
they
enough.
really have.
And they do, hopefully they'll get some return from this money.
What about Rishi Sunak taking what looks a bit like a Labour position on plundering the big energy companies in this latest front page?
People say every
for the
Labour
Times?
policy becomes a Tory policy eventually. I think, as your previous guest was saying, actually, it isn't necessarily a Labour policy.
Right.
I mean, it's popular, isn't it? And 7.2 billion made by BP makes a bit of sense to do that. I think there is a little bit of concern at the way large companies now are. Their relationship with the government is changing, and we're not really living in capitalism as such. It's more a case of if you're doing very well, we'll take a slice of that, and if you're collapsing and struggling, the government will step in and save you. And I think that isn't necessarily a very healthy thing for the future in the world. But, you know, I think these headlines will benefit Sunak. I think it's good ahead of COP. You know, it seems to be what people want. I think it's probably the right political thing to do. Whether it's right morally, financially, I'm not so sure.
Thoughts on COP?
I think he got bullied into U-turning, and he did. And I think as long as that's the extent of his U-turning, that'll be all right. Whether he sacks Suella Braverman is the big U-turn question.
Not going to do that. Don't you think, Claire, he's going to COP because Boris Johnson was getting there first, and he couldn't possibly allow Boris to upstage him?
I think that's partly true, but I also think Freddie's right. There's a bit of a bullying of this, and I wish he would have kept to his agreement not to go and focus on the domestic situation. Yeah. I actually supported him on that because I thought it was the right thing to do. Send out your Environment Secretary, the outgoing president. I don't think he needed to do it. However, being upstaged by Boris Johnson was a risk too far politically for him, so I can understand why he's done it. I just wish this wasn't a U-turn so early on. And
also the awkward dance with the King. And it is interesting how many stories are about the King in the papers at the moment.
And some suggestion that Rishi actually wanted to overturn Truss's ban on the King going to COP.
Yes, but it was too late.
But it's too late because of his diary.
He'd have to charter a private jet, which is not a good look for COP.
Couldn't they all have done this wretched conference on Zoom?
And
that would have saved quite a few private jets.
Better for the planet as well.
Isn't kind of the point? There's a certain irony to be flying in private jets out to Sharm el-Sheikh when realistically this is another meeting that could be done over Zoom.
Boris will be there in a private jet because he won't be in the Prime Minister's plane.
He's not being given a lift, is he?
No.
He's not allowed to ride shotgun in the private
Air Force One will be flying in from the United States.
Yeah, I find it all very hypocritical. I'm not quite sure how much work gets done. There are enormous a lot of promises that are made,
and never
but actual progress is very
Can you remember any of the COP26 promises from was it Cornwall last year?
They all got sort of ripped up, didn't they? It was Glasgow, and they all got ripped up pretty much.
Glasgow,
yes, but all of it is linked into the role of the government. I mean, when we're talking about the migrant crisis, if we're allowing vast swathes of Africa to become desert effectively through climate change, there will be more mass migration. We have huge pressure on our services here as a result. I mean, I feel like it's very short-sighted of him not to have wanted to go in the first place. I understand there's a crisis at home that needs to be dealt with. That's part of the role of Prime Minister. You're a statesman. You have to go onto the global stage and fly the flag for these issues.
But I also think it's the job of the Prime Minister to delegate these responsibilities out to somebody like the Environment Secretary. Perhaps the Business Secretary ought to be.
He'd already demoted Alok Sharma from the Cabinet.
Only because the presidency is coming up. So I can understand that. But if you're sending out senior ministers, that's the job of the Prime Minister to be able to put these things onto those shoulders. That's what they're there for. That's why they're Secretaries of State.
I think voters are thinking, get the flipping financial things sorted out rather than jaw-jawing in a nice part of Egypt.
I'm just excited as to how Joe Biden's going to pronounce his name, wouldn't he?
Joe Biden, who's now turned 80. Do you think that's going to be affecting his poll ratings even more, I would think? That's going to real turn off a young...
Well, he's working pretty hard because the midterms are next week. It's going to be a big story. And
I think
postal votes are already going in, aren't they?
Sorry, what?
Are the postal votes already going in?
No, most of them are already gone, very high turnout expected for these midterms. And at the moment, it looks like the Republicans are going to do very well. And so Biden...
Trump supporters, too, are going to do well.
Yes, all the Trump-endorsed candidates are looking very strong indeed. Or not all of them, but quite a few of them.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is.
Claire, let's look at the front of the Mail. Actually, you should do this story because this is your paper.
It is. It is. Very important story, Claire.
It is. 1 in 6 of us born overseas. And when you read that, it looks like it's a lot, but I'd just like to point out I am one of those 1 in 6. I was born overseas.
As was the Prime Minister.
I was born in Cyprus.
Right.
My father was in the forces. Yeah. My father was born in Singapore for that same reason. So don't really come from anywhere. But it is quite interesting looking at the census details. It's the Romanian population that have grown the most, which is not surprising given in 2014 the rules were relaxed and they could come over to the United Kingdom. I think Poland is another one, India, Pakistan, all on the increase. Now that is one of these subjects which is going to inflame the already volatile immigration debate in this country. Because people will look at that and say, they're all coming over here, freeloading off the country, when that isn't strictly true.
Yeah.
So I think that it needs breaking down. It's a good headline. It's really interesting to see demographic shifts. And you're right when you say about what's happening globally with the climate and why people are moving and conflicts, and that's why people are on the move. Migration is a really interesting subject, which gets conflated and confused with migration, immigration, refugees, asylum seekers, and then you end up with an argument. But I actually think it's really fascinating where people are coming from and what they're bringing to a country, but also where else they're moving to. It's not just here. Everybody is not being, you know, like a magnet to this country. All across the world. I'll be interested to see figures for, say, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, America, because I think we would see different demographic shifts similar to this. But I do think this is really, in a decade, is quite outstanding, just what's happening.
Yes.
I think a lot of the attraction, of course, is the English language.
Yes.
It's a huge magnet.
Yes.
A huge magnet.
It is, yeah.
But you're right, some people will seize on this and say, let's see, we're meant to have control of our borders, why are all these people coming in here? And it will feed that debate.
Yeah, although net migration, I think it was something like 240,000 last year, which was actually down on a peak of 340,000 at its highest. So it might be beginning to tail off.
I think it's gone back since Brexit.
Right. Yes, because, of course, Romanians and Polish will find it harder to come in, although I think the highest number of immigrants come from India, don't they? And that remains very significantly the highest.
But a lot went back because of COVID.
They did. They went back during the pandemic because they wanted to be at home. And if they hadn't applied for their EU settled status, then they just didn't come back. And I think that's a lot of the shift in the demographic on that one and a shift in the figures. They just didn't come back over.
Absolutely. If we can talk, Claire, as well, on The Guardian, extraordinary. Home Office abandoning migrants in the street.
Yeah, I mean...
Is the Home Office fit for purpose? Did John Reid not say that famously once, back in 2005 or 6? Labour Home Secretary? It's hopeless.
Every week you have a Home Office story. Every day you have a Home Office story at the moment. And these individuals were removed from Manston, as promised, to reduce the numbers, and they were brought to Victoria Station in London and just told to go.
Shouldn't laugh.
They weren't... We shouldn't laugh. I mean...
Some of them were in flip-flops.
Some of them were in flip-flops and they were in flimsy clothing. They had no money. They didn't know where they were going. Some of them managed to speak to people who understood their language. Most of them do speak English, but I think a lot of these individuals from sort of Syria managed to make contact with other people in the country, so at least they could understand where they were. The Home Office has admitted that it was a communication error and they shouldn't have been left. But it took until sort of 2 a.m. and a local charity to take them in, give them some warm clothing and some food before they were moved on to, I believe it's into Norwich and Suffolk, that kind of area where they were put in hostels.
It's a metaphor for everything that's going wrong in that.
It is,
You're
really right.
asylum system. That sums it up, really.
Whatever you think of immigration, whatever you think of this particular situation, to just abandon people...
That's appalling.
...is appalling.
Middle of one of the busiest cities in the world. With limited
to leave them
language.
on the streets in this weather.
Terrible.
In a pair of flip-flops and a T-shirt.
Well, look, let us know your thoughts this morning on all of the subjects we've covered in the papers. We'll have more from Claire Pissell and Freddie Gray at around the same time in the 7 o'clock. But for now, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you. Now, have you ever been mocked, criticised or singled out for your accent? If the answer is yes, you're not alone, according to a new report.
Yes, the Sutton Trust's Speaking Up report found that a person's place of origin plays an important part in accent anxiety as a child, with the north of England and the Midlands affected the most.
Here to tell us more is Senior Researcher and Policy Manager for the Sutton Trust, Dr Rebecca Montacute.
Good morning to you, Doctor. Tell us a bit about this then, because, you know, a lot of people might do it in jest, not meaning anything malign. Is that fair?
I think certainly there may be people doing it who don't realise the full ramification of their actions. But if we think about some of the kinds of things people have reported to us, it is really quite serious. So, for instance, someone was told after they went for a promotion and they didn't get it, they were a great candidate, but shame about the voice. People have told us that they've had what they would be saying in their accent kind of back to them in a mocking voice. Someone said that they were asked if they were from a council estate just because of their accent. And someone was told in a work context, who was a civil servant, wow, you're not a typical civil servant, are you? So certainly you can imagine if you're hearing that kind of day in, day out in your workplace, that really can have quite a serious impact on how you feel, that there are instances where actually it is a blocker for people to being promoted, getting a role, really quite serious.
Of accent snobbery out there, and it's almost on the turn, and that if you have what's perceived to be a posh accent, you're more likely to be ridiculed for it than perhaps if you have a regional accent. Certainly in our industry, it's very much wanted to have a regional accent, and to have received pronunciations definitely unfashionable. Are you hearing that?
So that actually isn't what we've heard, and I think there certainly could be certain industries where having an accent could be beneficial. But actually, for people in earlier life stages, it's those from the North and the Midlands who are saying that they've got the kind of most accent anxiety. When we look later on for kind of older professionals, it's people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who are saying that they're experiencing the most accent anxiety. So 29% of senior managers from working class families said they've been mocked or criticised in the workplace for their accent, versus only 29% of those from better off families. So there's definitely differences both by region and by class. And it's those from the North and the Midlands, and it's those from working class families who are the most impacted.
Which accent is, come on, you've got to tell us, which accent is ridiculed the most? I've got a suspicion. I wonder if I'm right.
Yeah, so members of the general public were asked about what they view of the kind of prestige of accents, so which they think are the most and then are therefore the least prestigious. So the most is that kind of received pronunciation, Queen's English, BBC English. Only about 10% of the population actually have that accent, and they're largely from kind of better off families, but that is the kind of considered most prestigious. Then after that, you have things like kind of standard Scottish, so what someone might speak if they're from, say, quite a well-off family in Edinburgh, standard Southern Irish, again, similarly from Dublin. Then in the middle, you have accents like Welsh and West Country. And then down towards the bottom in terms of prestige, you have ones like Manchester, Liverpool, and then unfortunately right at the bottom is Birmingham and a Birmingham accent.
Well, that was my hunch. Now, that was my hunch. And I've got a terrible confession. When I went to work for the Birmingham Mail many, many, many years ago, I was working in a district office in North Worcestershire. I'd been at the office for an hour. I sneaked out to a telephone call box and rang a friend and said, "The accent here, I can't believe it. Is my voice going to go the same way?" And I was there for 18 months, 2 years. It never did. But the boss in that office, she called me up in front of all the staff and said, "Why do you speak like you went to a prep school?" Because she sent her son to a private school, very smart school, Bromsgrove School, strong Birmingham accent. And I pointed out, well, actually, where I come from, Sandy, as their name was, everybody speaks like me. It's you lot who've got the funny accent. And by the way, I said, I went to a comprehensive school. I didn't go to a prep school.
So I think part of the reason that you might have had such a reaction to that accent is probably because you're much less used to hearing it.
Yeah.
If that's the first time you're hearing it, then you will have that kind of reaction. That's natural in terms of how humans react. But if we had a wider representation of accents in day-to-day life, then probably you'd be less likely to have that reaction to a Birmingham accent.
My grandmother was Belgian. Alphonsine was her name, and she married my grandfather, who was British. They met during the war. And she gave birth to my father in Newcastle. She couldn't understand a word the midwives were saying. She'd never forget that she was, in labour and they were telling her to push and all the rest of it. She had no idea what they were saying because they're lovely accents. I had a West Country boyfriend with a thick West Country accent, and I genuinely believe some accents actually make you feel warmth, improves your perception, makes you automatically think that they are kinder, sweeter, more innocent, perhaps. And maybe that's my perception, but I sort of see accents as very positively. But that's not what your research has borne out.
Unfortunately not. And obviously there can be differences in how individuals view them. You can have instances like individual instances where perhaps you might see the other way around of somebody being kind of mocked for a posh accent. But certainly our research has found that this really common kind of mocking anxiety is largely those from the North and the Midlands and people from working class accents. And most of it from the kind of comments we've had from individuals about what they have experienced does unfortunately appear to be very negative.
What is your favourite accent?
Mine has to be, so some viewers might have guessed this from my accent, but mine is toned down a lot over the years. But mine is a West Country accent
There
originally.
you go.
So that's will be my favourite.
Where in the West Country?
I'm from Somerset, just outside of Bristol.
Oh, whereabouts? Because my first job was in radio in the West Country, so I know it all very well. Whereabouts in Somerset?
Oh, great. I'm from the Chew Valley, if you know that at all.
Beautiful. Oh, there's a lovely lake. Chew Magna Lake's lovely
Very
there. Thank you so much. Really interesting to get your take. And, of course, at home, if you're watching this and you're screaming at the telly, you're upset about your accent or indeed the opposite, let us know. That was Dr. Rebecca Montacute, Senior Research and Policy Manager for the Sutton Trust. Lots of people have been getting in touch this morning with their views. Thank you so much for those. Paul says, we were talking about doing one thing a day and you were talking about your medicine ball.
Yeah.
Paul says he's an abs trainer. For fitness, Isabel, a good way is to lie down, rock forward, your stomach will be flat and firm. How do you know it isn't already? I'm also an ex-British soldier. I've never known a better exercise machine. There you go, top tip.
Yeah, and Lee says, hi, if energy companies make so much profit, how much have we paid to government in fuel tax? A lot, which is a very good point, which is why there's got to be a windfall tax, and there will be.
There will be. Keep those thoughts coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. After the break, we'll have more on that upcoming interest rate decision and what it could mean for you. But first, here's your Thursday forecast.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGivern here with the forecast. More rain for some of us today. Brighter skies for many compared with yesterday, but there are further showers coming our way. And for the southeast, some more persistent rain because Wednesday's system, well, the low pressure at least is clearing to the north, but its lingering weather front is sticking around for some time across East Anglia and the southeast. And as a result, it's a wet start for London, East Anglia, southeast England. And that rain will come and go, I think, through the day. It could cause some issues on the roads because 20, 30, perhaps 40 millimetres of rain accumulating through the day. Well, that might be troublesome. Further west, brighter skies, yes, but further showers pushing through, particularly across western parts of the UK. I think northeast Scotland faring well for sunshine and predominantly drier weather, and all areas feeling a bit cooler compared with recent days, 10 or 11 in the north and 13 or 14 further south. Now, the showers, if anything, get going a bit more during the evening and overnight, especially across parts of Wales into the southwest of England and then later across southern counties of England. Hail and thunder, always a possibility, gusty winds as well, and the risk of some, well, high rainfall totals in a short space of time across southern counties of England. Elsewhere, clearer skies are moving in, lighter winds, and as a result, Friday starts off colder compared with recent mornings. In fact, you probably have to go back to the second week of October to see a morning as cold as this. Touch of frost in places, -3 or -4 Celsius in some sheltered spots in the north. But a bright start, plenty of blue skies out there. Once any early showers have cleared from the south, there will be further showers coming in from the northwest, but actually a decent amount of sunny spells in between those showers. And it's a colder day compared with recent days. Again, you have to go back to the beginning or the second week of October, but temperatures will start to edge upwards this weekend as further areas of low pressure move in. Wet and windy on Saturday, blustery showers on Sunday, highs of 14 Celsius.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
The Bank of England looks set to unveil the biggest hike to interest rates since Black Wednesday.
A very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 3rd of November, and this is Breakfast on GB News with me, Isabel Webster, and with Andrew Pearce, our new Thursday regular. Welcome aboard.
Very much.
So this is what's leading our news this morning.
Markets are predicting that today's interest rate hike from the Bank of England could be the biggest in 30 years, pushing rates to 3%. It follows a similar move in the United States last night.
The Prime Minister is reportedly eyeing a tax grab from energy companies to fill a £50 billion budget black hole. The expansion of the windfall tax could be announced in the Chancellor's autumn statement later this month.
The latest GB News People's poll has revealed that more than half of people think the British government has lost control of the country's borders. It comes amid reports that migrants from the Manston Centre have been abandoned by the Home Office on the streets of London.
And paying our respects with a poppy. We'll be live from London's Poppy Day as actor and presenter Ross Kemp joins serving and ex-service volunteers ahead of Remembrance Sunday.
Get in touch and let us know what you think of the big stories making the news today. GB Views at GB News UK.
Welcome to the programme. Our top story this morning, the Bank of England will unveil its latest interest rate decision today, with markets expecting it to rise by 0.75%. That's the biggest hike since Black Wednesday 30 years ago.
The move, which would bring interest rates to 3%, is a response to skyrocketing inflation, which reached a new 40-year high in September.
And the move will be especially worrying for homeowners, with those on tracker mortgages facing an almost £900 increase to their payments.
Well, as Downing Street braces for today's announcement, GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood joins us live from Number 10. Morning, Tom.
Good morning. Yes, it's going to be a fairly nervous day in not just Number 10, but also Number 11 Downing Street. We remember the last time that the Bank of England changed their base rate. It was the day before that fateful mini-budget. Now, many people in the Conservative Party say that actually a lot of the market turmoil, a lot of the change in the exchange rate, particularly between the pound and the dollar, was as a result as much of that Bank of England decision as it was of all of those tax cuts and unfunded spending commitments within the mini-budget, many of which have now been reversed. We'll remember the former Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, particularly talking about the interest rate differential between the United Kingdom and the United States. Well, following the news from the Federal Reserve last night that US rates have risen to 4%, UK rates are still at 2.25%. So even with a historic 0.75 rise this morning, we will still see a 1% gap between the US and the UK when it comes to those base rates. And that potentially is one of the reasons we've seen the pound slip this week from $1.16 down to $1.14. So clearly there are issues when it comes to the exchange rate from having too low interest rates. However, also on the political side of things, the government is very wary of rates going too high, because we know that that makes mortgages less affordable for people. Mortgage rates go up as a consequence of interest rates going up. And interestingly, when Jeremy Hunt became Chancellor, he started talking about doing everything that he could to encourage the Bank of England to not raise rates by particularly much. And a lot of the fiscal tightening that we're going to see in this fiscal statement on the 17th of this month will be about the government showing that on the fiscal side of things, they can tighten things up to deal with inflation, perhaps leaving less to do on the monetary side of things, so the Bank of England doesn't raise rates to as high as they could possibly have been going. But as I say, rates are still at historic lows. 2.25% as they are today is historically low. It's still in this peculiar aberration period that we saw after the financial crisis. And we are expecting some normalisation, and that does mean a fairly hefty rise today.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. I hope you managed to get a bit of respite from the rain as well today. Lots of metaphors in that, I'm sure. Thank you very much indeed. Look, to help us unpick exactly what all of this means now, let's speak to Jim Pickard. He's the Chief Political Editor for the Financial Times. Very good morning to you. Look, there have been criticisms, haven't there, of the Governor of the Bank of England, that he's been pretty slow in dealing with inflation. We're expecting this big hike today. Too much too late, or too little too late? What's your take on it all?
I mean, there is criticism of the Bank of England and the governor in particular. I think the problem they've got, though, is that when you have an inflation target of 2%, and when you have this sudden inflation shock that is caused by global factors, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has put incredible pressure on the price of oil and gas, and that has caused this inflation around the world. And therefore, they found themselves just in this impossible position where you can't hold inflation at that low level without whacking up interest rates faster. So the criticism of the Bank of England is that they could have put up interest rates earlier and they could have done it in a more steady way. But I don't think that would have prevented the pain that is heading the way of millions of households, where we've seen figures suggesting that by the end of 2024, there are going to be something like 5 million households having to pay something like £5,000 a year more on their mortgages. I mean, that's an incredible shock to the system. There was a prediction by Nationwide, I think last night, suggesting that in their worst case scenario, house prices could fall as a result by something up to 30%. I suspect that the house price correction that's coming our way will be less than 30%. But, when you think about it, that's going to be pretty severe for an awful lot of people with wider repercussions potentially for the financial system. So it's an incredibly serious situation. I don't entirely see what the Bank of England could have done differently unless you go back years and you put up interest rates to a higher level years ago, and therefore prevented the asset bubble that we've seen in property and elsewhere happening. I just think that inflation hit the world so hard and so quickly that there wasn't that much that the MPC could do on this.
Jim, you mentioned the global factors, and we know interest rates are rising from Aspen to Aldershot all around the world. But nevertheless, it's the Conservative government that's going to get quite a lot of the blame for the interest rate rises, mortgages going up, because of the way the market reacted to the Truss quasi-Kwarteng budget, how spooked those markets were, which then saw various mortgages being withdrawn immediately from the market.
Yeah, and listening to Tom earlier, he was absolutely correct to say that the mini budget came the day after the Fed had put up interest rates and the MPC had put up interest rates last time round, and that had as much of an impact as the actual mini budget. But what Liz Truss did, the mistake she made, was to come up with that £45 billion of unfunded tax cuts at a point where interest rates were going up as well. It basically just spooked the markets incredibly. And therefore, even though that wasn't the only reason for the financial chaos we saw for that month, I think in the minds of the public, they will remember this as a Conservative mistake, a Conservative government mistake. And John Curtis, who's one of the most famous pollsters in Britain, did a presentation yesterday where he said that if you go back over the last century and you look at governments which have gone to the polls after a big fiscal shock, they normally get absolutely punished at the ballot box. Now, obviously, history doesn't repeat itself precisely every single time, but there's quite a warning there for Rishi Sunak. And of course, he can say that he wasn't in charge when this happened. It was his predecessor, but it was a Conservative government. He's a Conservative. They have been in power for 12 years. And when people's mortgage rates do go up, I think they may understand that inflation is a trend that's happening worldwide, but I think there will be a lot of blame for the government. And yes, Tom's point that the period of interest rates being at rock bottom, of course, the Bank of England rate was only 0.1% in December. Yes, that has been a historic anomaly. We are returning to levels that are more normal on a kind of historic basis. But I don't think the public are going to be very forgiving of that. And of course, when you've been at incredibly low rates and people are fixing their mortgages at 1% or 1.5%, and then it goes up to 4, 5, 6, I think some people are predicting 7% mortgages on fixed rates. That is a huge proportionate increase in terms of it may not sound like a massive increase, but in proportionate terms, it's huge, and people are going to feel an awful lot of pain. I mean, I think in terms of today's increase, the market thinks it's a 0.75% increase we're going to see, or 0.75 percentage points to be more precise, a rise from 2.25 to 3. I think people on variable mortgages will definitely see a rise as a result of that. I think for fixed rate mortgages, that the increase will be a little bit less, because I think the measures that Rishi Sunak has taken since becoming Prime Minister, and Jeremy Hunt has taken since becoming Chancellor, and the measures that are anticipated in the fiscal event in a couple of weeks, I think that has steadied the gilts market. And therefore, if you're on a fixed rate mortgage, the jump today or in the coming days may be a little less than if you're on a variable rate.
OK, Jim, I just wanted to ask you, before we let you go, we talk a lot about, this being a global problem. We're seeing inflation rise, and we talk a lot about how America's dealing with it. Really interesting, I think, to see what's happening in Europe. I think inflation in the Netherlands is something like 17%, whereas in France, only 7%. So obviously they want different things in terms of interest rates. And European financial ministers having a real row, aren't they, at the moment, about how to tackle this problem. Lots of people over in the UK, but a schadenfreude, thinking, well, we don't have that to deal with, at least.
Yeah, I mean, that was always the argument, wasn't it, about why we shouldn't join the euro, would be that you'd be locked into a situation where you'd get the same interest rate changes as Greece or another country in the EU. So, you could see that as potentially one benefit of not being part of that single currency. But, I think we have enough problems of our own to not enjoy too much schadenfreude about what's happening on the other side of the English Channel.
Well, to get to an idea of how charities are responding to the proposed hike, Theo Chikomba, our GB News national reporter, is in Northamptonshire. Morning, Theo.
Good morning. Yes, we are in Northamptonshire this morning, and as you've been talking already this morning, interest rates, we are expecting a decision from the Bank of England around midday today. And of course, people will be looking to see how this impacts their mortgages, savings, and of course, what this also does for the economy going forward at a time when the Bank of England is trying to curb inflation and also what has been described as a looming recession. And this morning, I'm kindly joined by Lee, one of the founders of the Lewis Foundation. Just tell me, what are your thoughts on the interest rates, and has this impacted your charity this year in particular?
Yeah, obviously, if interest rates goes up, it does put a big effect on us. We noticed a big notice on our donations have gone down by 90%. So it does really affect people, and it takes that extra money that people had to help charities and help themselves.
And of course, you rely on people helping you to help others as well. Who are you helping, and how does your work here help them, particularly if they're in hospital?
So we run a charity called the Lewis Foundation, and basically we noticed a boredom in hospitals when my mum was in there. So what we realised is people are just sitting there with no one to visit them. There's boredom, there's isolation. So we created these little gift packs, which we do 29, and we go into hospitals just to give people a gift pack to stop boredom and give them something to look forward to.
And of course, the financial situation of the people in there, is it something they perhaps are struggling with, and you're trying to help them as well whilst they're in hospital?
Yeah, so we've noticed that people, obviously, when they've got cancer, they sort of lose their jobs or they sort of have a break from their jobs. And financially, they're really struggling. People can't afford the simple things like magazines, toiletries. And you do notice that it's getting bigger and bigger, and we're sort of getting the need to help more and more people.
And of course, going forward, your demand is growing, so you'd at least want the economy to be stable in the future as well, isn't it?
Yeah, with our charity, it's growing all the time. Like since COVID, we've took on 7 more hospitals. There's a big need for it. People don't realise there's a lot of isolation and how bored people are in hospitals, especially cancer patients, because financially they're really struggling anyway. So if you take more money off people, it's going to really, really affect charities.
And just to get a sense of, where you've come from, when did you start and where do you see yourself going as well?
So we started 6 years ago just in Northampton, and we just sort of grew just word of mouth and just sort of nurses noticing we're being nice to patients, and they sort of wanted it in their hospitals. We just want to keep going further and further and helping as many people as we can.
Lee, thank you so much for that. And of course, as you heard there from Lee, they are helping those in hospitals, and today they'll be looking to see what the Bank of England decides and how it's going to impact them going forward.
OK, Theo, thanks very much indeed.
Time check. Let's bring you up to date with the time. 7:14. And asylum seekers were reportedly, can you believe this, left at London's Victoria Station on Tuesday after being taken out of the Manston Processing Centre in Kent. The Guardian says the group of 11 men were driven to the capital as part of a larger group. Hundreds of people have been moved out of the Manston facility amid concerns it had become dangerously overcrowded.
A new report examining the emergency response to the Manchester Arena bombing will be published today. It'll look at whether any inadequacies contributed to individual deaths. 22 people were killed and hundreds injured in a suicide attack at an Ariana Grande concert in 2017.
And the Foreign Secretary will warn allies that Vladimir Putin is plunging the world's poorest further into despair. Speaking at a meeting of G7 foreign ministers in Germany, James Cleverly will stress the need to work together amid economic insecurity driven by that war in Ukraine.
Now, in a significant U-turn, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will now be attending the COP27 climate summit next week. He had previously opted not to go so that he could focus on Britain's domestic problems.
The change of mind comes amid reports Sunak is drawing up plans with Chancellor Jeremy Hunt to extend the windfall tax on energy companies to plug the £50 billion budget black hole.
Well, our political reporter, Olivia Hutley, joins us in the studio. Very good morning to you, Olivia. Nice to finally meet you in person.
Nice to meet you.
Listen, let's talk about this because it was quite clear that Rishi Sunak did not want to go to COP27. Is it the blonde bombshell threatening to outdo him once again?
I think it probably is. I think, whether or not Rishi Sunak goes to COP27 is sort of neither here nor there. It's a bit of a Westminster bubble story. But what's interesting about it is that it's the first chink we've really seen in Rishi Sunak's armour. Obviously, just 2 weeks ago, he won a huge proportion of the parliamentary party, put their weight behind him, support him to be Prime Minister. But at the time, it felt a little bit as though that was a pretty fragile coalition he'd put together. He had people from the left and the right of the party. Now, he said, quite justifiably, many might argue, that he didn't want to go to COP27 to focus on domestic issues. And first, Alok Sharma, the former COP president, who's been removed from the cabinet, did a very outspoken interview on Newsnight about how it was undermining Britain's position as a green leader for the Prime Minister not to attend COP27. And then we had Boris Johnson, who claimed he was going to be helpful to the Prime Minister, saying that he was going to go to COP27, which obviously shows up for Rishi Sunak. So now Sunak has had to make this really quite embarrassing U-turn.
And let's not forget the King in all of this as well. There's been a little bit of sort of toing and froing with the King and Rishi Sunak on this.
Yes, so the King wanted to go to COP27, was advised, it seems, by Liz Truss's government not to go to COP27, and Rishi Sunak has upheld that. There are lots of people who think, well, why not just send the King and focus on the domestic issues yourself? That would have seemed to have made sense. But that's not how it's played out, which is interesting in itself because Rishi Sunak is this slick operator who plays the political moves very savvily, but he doesn't seem to have managed that in this situation.
I think one of the papers was suggesting this morning, Olivia, that the Prime Minister was moving towards perhaps the King could go after all. King would jump at the chance, of course, although he's hosting a reception here, of course, for various environmental leaders, but it just doesn't work with the King's diary. So another reason why I suppose Sunak thinks he has to go. But why didn't he make a statement and say, I'm going to do it on a Zoom call? Because I don't want to get on a plane, a private plane. We're going to save the environment. A lot of other world leaders could have done the same, because we know what's happened. Private jets are going to be flying in from all around the world. It's going to be a great big jamboree. Hundreds of journalists going too. I don't know if you're going. No, very good. See, we don't cause climate change here on GB News. But I mean, it is going to be a great hot air talking shop. And I think he could have been quite strategic, Rishi Sunak, and said, I'm going to go on a Zoom call.
Well, yeah, and the interesting thing about it is that Greta Thunberg herself, as far as I'm aware, isn't going because she feels that the whole thing has become too commercialised and it's become an area for rich people to virtue signal rather than do anything about climate change. So I thought when that news broke, it would completely validate Rishi Sunak's decision not to attend. And then he's made this U-turn, seemingly because of pressure among the parliamentary ranks.
Interesting. How long does he go for?
Sorry?
How long does he go for?
I think it's 2 days.
Right.
And that'll be his first foray onto the international stage, because, of course, as Chancellor, very much at number 11 and up and down the UK. We haven't ever seen him abroad, have we?
No, we haven't. And that'll be quite interesting in itself. I think that one thing that Rishi Sunak is quite concerned to avoid is he obviously has this image as a sort of very international, rich, global politician, and he wants to make it very clear that he is focused on what's happening at home in Britain and that he's concerned about domestic issues above sort of international jamborees, which is probably part of the reason why he wanted to avoid going. But yes, it'll be really fascinating to see how he behaves on the international stage.
Well, I wonder if the President of the United States will remember who he is.
Oh,
Will
he's
he
80.
get his name
He's
wrong
80.
again?
He's
Will he get his
80. I
name
know,
wrong
it's
again?
so awkward.
Rishi, what did he call him? I
can't remember, but, you know, it was interesting. Narendra Modi even got the names of his daughters correct when he called him to congratulate him on becoming Prime Minister. So that sort of tells you something in itself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Olivia Utley, thank you very much. Lovely
Great to see you.
Right, stay with us after the break. It's all sport. Looking forward to
I
that.
can't wait for this bit.
Paul Coit will be here with all the big sports stories, including the latest from the Champions League.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back at 7:24. Still to come on today's programme.
We're going to be asking the chair of the Labour Party, Anneliese Dodds, if Labour would support Rishi Sunak's rumoured expansion to the windfall tax.
At 8:45, from dancing like nobody's watching to cold showers, Dr. Michael Mosley will be here telling us some small tweaks that we can make to transform our lives.
You can join in any of our discussions, of course, by emailing gbviews at gbnews.uk or you tweet at GB News.
It's time for Paul Coit now to bring us up to date on all the big sports stories. I do have to say very quickly, though,
please not the cheese. Please not the cheese.
Yes, on the cheese, because yesterday, Andrew, we were talking about the World Cheese Championships and Paul made this shocking revelation that he doesn't like cheese.
What?
Now, every day...
Not you as well.
Every day we have a
Please.
post-programme meeting and we go through the programme, we discuss what's worked, what hasn't worked, what we like, what we don't like.
Sure.
About 60% of that meeting was dominated by the incredulous reaction
You know what?
to your cheese announcement.
I walked in this morning and usually I'm like, morning, everybody. Oh, morning, Paul. Morning. It was like a silence. It was like really bizarre. And I'm thinking, what have I done? And it was just someone holds up a piece of cheese and I'm like...
I don't know anybody who doesn't like cheese.
You do know.
You're a freak, Paul. It's a fact. That's what we're saying.
Were you force-fed it as a child by a cruel parent?
I went through. I think
or
it
a
was
cruel
as a
teacher.
I think it was as a kid going around the supermarket. The smell of the cheese.
Wonderful smell.
You know that you must have. There must be people that don't like cheese.
Poor Paul. I feel sorry for you now.
Does Mrs. Paul? Does she like cheese?
She loves cheese. Everybody loves cheese apart from me. Although my son takes after his dad.
Oh,
can't bear the cheese. So I said, if there's two things in the world that he can take after me, one is Tottenham Hotspur and the other one is cheese.
Right.
Not liking the cheese. So that's where...
Job done.
It's fantastic.
Talking
work is
football.
done. Yes.
Talking football. Should we talk about the Champions League results last night?
Yeah, Champions League. It was the final group stage matches of the Champions League. So all the British teams, or I say the British teams, the English teams, because we're going to get onto that, have done very well. Chelsea beat Dinamo Zagreb 2-1, although Ben Chilwell, full-back for Chelsea, I know one of your favourite players there is. He is, unfortunately, and there he is. Pulled up, I don't know what we would say, but there we are. Pulled up lame.
Oh, no.
Or it's a hamstring, and it's a really bad time for a hamstring injury. Obviously, any time for a footballer is bad, but with the World Cup round the corner...
Is he an England player?
He is, and we're probably looking 2 to 3 weeks, maybe longer, and the World Cup is only round the corner, so that could be the end of the World Cup for him. So
he probably doesn't want to go to horrible Qatar anyway.
Do you not think so? You think he'd rather not go?
Terrible.
You know what? It's funny you should say that, though. There are injuries. You do get players that feign injuries when a World Cup is coming up. Now, there is an interesting amount of players across Europe who, strangely now, with a couple of games to go, it's like, I've got to pull, I've got to tear.
Because they don't want to go to Qatar?
I think it's because they don't want to play, because they don't want to miss playing in Qatar, because there they can play in the World Cup. So they're very careful about thinking, well, the last thing I want to do is get injured now before the World Cup. Although there's another thing that happens when we're getting towards Christmas and you get a lot of players, it's been known, and it still goes on, where you may get a player get a yellow card or a red card coming up to Christmas time, which they know very well means they'll be banned for 3 games, and therefore
shocking.
it happens.
Do you know
Seriously,
what?
it does happen.
There was a lot of COVID, now I think about it, around Christmas in the football. There wasn't there? There were all these games being cancelled.
It's a conspiracy theory, but I know from players in the past that have said, look, you know, I know that if I get a yellow card, so maybe maybe going a little bit too hard on that tackle.
Like every Christmas, I mean, we know what that's
I'm
like.
feeling desperately sorry for them with their £3
There you
million
go.
a year
Such a lovely
salaries.
cynic.
So if you're working over Christmas, Izzy, I'll just be watching for your slang tackles this weekend.
OK, perfect.
So we've got to be careful there. So Chelsea anyway, so that's bad for Ben Chilwell. Manchester City 3, Sevilla 1. Now, they've got a fantastic young player by the name of Rico Lewis. Now, he made his debut for Manchester City yesterday, 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
He's a child, for crying out loud. 17, so not only making his full debut for probably the finest club side, arguably, in the world, but he's a local boy, comes from Bury, and to go in that team of superstars and not only hold your own, but also score a goal at 17.
He scored it on his debut.
And a brilliant goal as well, Andrew. So at 17 is terrific.
Yeah.
So congrats to him. Also, what other games have we got? Real Madrid beat. Now, this is when I mentioned British sides. Not so good for British sides. Rangers yesterday. They then broke the record then for the worst opening group stage for any team ever in the Champions League. It was awful for them. And Celtic haven't done much better. They got beat 5-1 by Real Madrid.
That'll upset Nicola Sturgeon,
so
Scottish leader. She invests a lot in sport. She invests a lot in sport. She wants them to do well.
But
She'll
Celtic?
be upset.
Yeah, do you think so?
Yeah.
OK.
Yeah.
You're not speaking to it.
I'm devastated.
OK.
Obviously.
I'm sure she's very, very upset that she won't be speaking to you about that tonight,
Exactly.
Andrew. So anyway, but tonight, Real Sociedad against Manchester United. This is in the Europa League. Manchester United need to win by 2 or more goals to go through straight into the round of 16. If they don't manage this, then they will play one of the teams that have gone in 3rd place. Tell me if I'm throwing you here. 3rd place of the Champions League, because they drop down into the Europa League. So there's a lot of good teams drop down to the Europa League. If they come 3rd, and then Manchester United, if they don't beat Real Sociedad by 2 or more goals, will play one of those.
All I need to know is, will Eamonn be happy or sad tomorrow? Because
well, if they win by 2 goals, we'll have a happy
Eamonn. That's all we need to know.
But he's never happy if Manchester City win, is he?
He's never happy if anybody else wins unless Manchester United. Yeah, that was the only saving grace, was the fact that he wasn't here when Manchester United beat Spurs the other week. That was the only thing that we've missed him for. Now, I also want to mention Ronnie Radford. Now, Ronnie Radford passed away yesterday, age of 79. Now, he's a legendary footballer, but only ever really is known for a goal that he scored back in 1972. You mentioned this, didn't you? You're familiar with it.
He was playing for a non-league team like Hereford.
It was Hereford, yeah. And Hereford played Newcastle United. So we talk about the FA Cup and those great old days of giant killing. This was the ultimate one. So 50 years ago, they were the glamour boys. Newcastle United, they go to Hereford. Hereford, non-league, didn't stand a chance. Malcolm MacDonald, who was the big star at the time, scores a goal after about 80 minutes and everybody thinks it's all over. Then Ronnie comes up, hits the ball from 35 yards, the pitch full of mud, it flies into the corner, and then he becomes a folk hero, and it's been with him ever since. Now, they went on to win the game, and also the other person it affected was John Motson, the great John Motson.
Oh, right.
That was his first big TV commentary. And so it's almost like Ronnie Radford and John Motson had this link for all those years.
Was he wearing that coat that first time?
He was wearing the coat, I'm sure. There's been a few...
Yeah.
The great big sheepskin.
Yeah.
That John would always wear. So poor Ronnie Radford. And I've got one more thing for you, and this is in the cricket. Something happened in the T20 of the cricket yesterday. And it featured a Zimbabwe player called Milton Shumba. Now, I don't know if you've seen around the outside. Now, look, we've seen the picture there. For anybody listening on the radio, there's Milton Shumba over the other side of the barrier there. They're almost like triangular, and they've had some injuries when people have run to the boundary, when players have run to the boundary and tripped over it. Now, poor Milton Shumba, fielding for Zimbabwe in the T20 World Cup against the Netherlands, runs chasing after a ball, slides not only over the boundary but also it takes his trousers down with him.
Yeah.
So if you look, so the poor old Milton there, seen laying on the floor. Not only did he get the ball, miss the ball, but he's also showing his pants as well.
And did they win or lose?
You know what? I don't even know. I don't even know.
What matters?
He lost his trousers.
Who cares? The guy's showing his pants.
And they were very nice light blue pants, by the way.
England are playing Sri Lanka, though, over the weekend, and that's the most important
Could have been worse. Could have lost his pants as well.
Oh, now, come on.
Sorry.
No,
33 minutes past 7. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, Paul, thank you so much. You do bring joy.
He does. Absolute joy. The two of us, we got through it.
There you go.
Now, after the break, we're going to be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Claire Pearsall.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now. We love this bit of
We do, it's our favourite.
It is. Joining us this morning is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and former Conservative advisor, Claire Pearsall. We're going to talk first, Freddie, police, Wayne Couzens, that terrible man.
Ugh.
This is a terrible story.
Yeah, really.
And this is an odd development in it, I think, which is that 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to 3 months in prison for being in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens, the killer of Sarah Everard, and exchanging disgusting content with him, dark humour, crude jokes. It's all very vile. We can all agree on that. They should have lost their jobs. I think we probably all agree with that. Do they deserve to be in 3 months in prison for privately sent messages? I think that's an interesting leap into the legal unknown.
What were the worst messages they were exchanging?
I don't think we could discuss them on this breakfast programme. They're really bad. They're really disgusting. And most of the papers don't actually touch on them. But
no, they don't. And it is appalling, the content that was shared. However, it now brings into question: is this going to set a precedent for everybody's WhatsApp conversations to be held up in court? I mean, I think the British government would have a problem. Parliament as a whole is run by WhatsApp. I just worry what precedent that sets. And I think Freddie's right that they deserve to be sacked for what they've done. But I'm not convinced that a WhatsApp group is enough to do that.
That's
It's
been
very
a legal
uncomfortable.
threshold, surely, for this to have gone through in court.
well, I thought
know the content.
I thought
as
that
you
was.
say.
I thought that's the interesting part of this story. Actually, is that their defence was that it was dark humour, banter, etc. And the judge said that they had training which they'd received that should have made them aware of the public reaction to these messages, which I think is an odd line from the judge, because, of course, if it's a private message, you're not thinking about the public reaction.
Is it, do you think, Freddie, they're being treated differently because they're police officers?
Yes, I think there's a mood to punish police officers at the moment. We see there's another story on the same page about another, maybe shouldn't say this at breakfast television, but a policewoman filmed herself committing a solo sex act in the lavatories. She has lost her job as well for a decision that she'll regret for the rest of her life. And you have to feel a bit sorry for PC Claire Ogden for that.
Doing it?
Well, I mean, she was obviously in a relationship with someone. She sent him a video. It was a silly thing to do, but she's lost her job. Yeah. She hasn't gone to jail, though.
But, no. Just going back to your point, do you think that police, they're being treated differently because they're police, or do you think they're being treated differently because in that WhatsApp group was Wayne Couzens, who has become a national monster?
Yeah. He is a national monster, and as I said, they should have lost their jobs. We hold policemen to a high standard in their jobs, but do we hold them to a higher criminal standard? I'm not sure we should.
And, of course, this has come out just the day after that report about the Metropolitan Police, where we've discovered there are all sorts of people with criminal records in serving officers. And the police failing to clean up their act.
That's right, and it's a worry when we are recruiting so many more officers so quickly. What is going to be the clearing process for them? Is this going to be done very quickly in order to get boots on the street? Are there going to be things that are overlooked? I think it's a real worry within the police service as a whole. I don't think it's just for the Metropolitan Police, which we all focus on, but I think forces up and down the country are going to have to look really, really carefully at who they have coming through their recruitment process. Because I think there was a number of sort of like 267,000 people applied to be police officers, but only 15,000 of them were deemed to be suitable to move to the next stage. So that's quite a big number who weren't. So you've got to wonder what it was that they weren't suitable, and these 15,000 doesn't mean that they'll all go on to be serving police officers. So I think recruitment in the police force is difficult. I think that it's a worry that it's going to be done too quickly. And then cases like this, if we're going to start prosecuting people for private messages, I'm quite uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of agreement on that, really, from across all of us. Claire, you've chosen the story, the front of the Express. Suella reportedly eyeing up 3 more countries. This is Peru, Paraguay and Belize. Presumably she's eyeing up countries that don't have such a controversial human rights record as a destination to process these illegal
That's right.
applicants.
And I'm normally very critical of the Home Secretary, but in this case, I don't think that this is a bad idea. I think that you have to look at opportunities to be able to process migrants coming over and asylum seekers, and we are at breaking point within our own asylum system. So I'm not averse to looking at somewhere like Paraguay, whose human rights record actually is good. Freedom of speech is allowed, it's encouraged. They take political prisoners in from places like Cuba. They are quite modern and diverse in that respect, I think that lefty lawyers, as we love to term them, will have difficulty finding an argument for this. I think it's right to look at alternatives. I was very uncomfortable with Rwanda. I knew it wouldn't work, having looked at these countries previously when I spent time at the Home Office. You could see that it was always going to be an issue and it was going to be very, very expensive and wasn't guaranteed to be delivered in time.
I mean, Paraguay's a long way away. It's not going to be cheap to fly hundreds, thousands of migrants over there.
But you have to balance...
But it's cheap, yeah.
Well, you're going to have to put them up over there as well, but yeah, presumably a lot cheaper.
You will. It will be a lot cheaper than the ongoing cost of keeping in hotels.
Effect, isn't it? If you get the planes to
Absolutely.
Paraguay, it's a deterrent.
Yes, it is. And also they may well find that life out there. They may find job opportunities. The Paraguay government will look for that because they also need workers. They're struggling just as much as everybody else. So it's just a sort of reshifting of everybody's expectations. It's not suggesting that the United Kingdom isn't a welcoming country. However, we have to share the burden with everybody else. So I don't think that this one is particularly bad. I'm actually quite softly supportive at the moment.
In our last segment, we were talking about, how population changes, inflows into Britain have actually been accommodated quite well. And I think this is sort of a natural development of it. I mean, in a globalised world, populations will have to be allocated to different parts. And if governments can help that process, then I think that's perhaps a good thing.
Yeah, now, Freddie, train delays, they drive me mad. I use trains a lot. They're the most expensive trains in Europe. They never seem to work on time. They're always on flipping strike. What have you found in the
This is in most of the papers. The Telegraph, train delays worse despite fewer journeys. Network Rail has been ordered to improve its performance.
Again.
They didn't seem to listen to those orders very much.
State-owned, remember.
3 in 10 journeys are now delayed. And this is not taking into account the strikes, which are another problem.
Yeah.
It's got worse. The pandemic was obviously a real problem. The government had to interfere massively to keep the train network going. It hasn't got better, it's got worse. It's a real problem. And actually, if you look, one real problem, I often think this doing these papers, is that every major institutional thing in British life at the moment is struggling with the police, hospitals, trains. Everything is struggling on the weight, and it is always links back to the pandemic. Things haven't recovered.
And we talk about things grinding to a halt. One of the direct consequences of trains being unreliable is people just give up on trains and turn to their cars. And we simply, we know we've got a growing population. We don't have the infrastructure to support all the cars. We used to try to get from one side of London to the other in your car.
It's a car park.
A car park. It's awful. The M25 is a car park.
Oh, I know.
London's got all those wretched cycle superhighways, which you very rarely see cyclists in. They're like nuts.
Well, have you been near one? They're fairly busy.
I often walk past and think, come on, where are all you cyclists? I tell you where they are. They're on the pavement, they're going through red lights and they're getting in the way. That's what they're doing.
I don't give you started on that, but I do agree with you on that one, and it really does wind me up when I see a cyclist going through a red light. Because if I did that, I would quite rightly have points on my licence, but cyclists can just get away. But that's a whole different argument to have. But I think what annoys me more about the train service, or lack thereof, is that they've used the pandemic to hide behind. They could have done a lot of the improvement works whilst people were not using the railways because we were all on lockdown. And all of those problems could have been sorted out, but they didn't do it. And all they do then is ramp up the price for commuters, saying, well, you're not using the service. And it's like, well, you're not using the service because it's so expensive, it is unreliable, it is not comfortable. My own service on South Eastern Railway has declined rapidly.
We have to leave it there. Claire Pearsall, Freddie Great, thank you both very much. I was just looking down the list of what was still to come. Christmas turkeys, bounty chocolate and magic mushrooms. Quite a menu. We'll see if we can get into some of those.
We're taking all three before we come.
All three before 9 o'clock. That's something to look forward to.
Very
Thank
much.
you both very much indeed. Now, it is the biggest street collection effort of its kind in Europe. At train and tube stations across London today, thousands of Army, Navy and RAF personnel will be joining veterans in asking the public if they'd like a poppy to support the Royal British Legion.
They're aiming to raise £1 million for the Poppy Appeal today, and it gets underway in Horse Guards Parade. Our reporter, Rosie Wright, is there for us.
A very good morning to both of you, and a really miserable day, let's be honest, in central London. The rain is coming down, but it could have been a lot more miserable. There was going to be a train and a tube strike today. That's been called off for a very special cause, the launch of London Poppy Day. Of course, the month of remembrance now, where we wear poppies, and the Royal British Legion encourage all of us to buy one of these. And all of these people here will be selling poppies to the public this morning. I'm joined now by Baz Firth. Baz, very good morning to you. Just explain, what is the purpose of today and the appeal?
It's for us as a military to get out and meet our public. We dedicate our lives to protect and defence of the country, and spend time with them, and to raise money for the RBL, which is a fantastic charity which supports all of us, the military, the veterans, the widows. It's just an amazing cause and a great day.
Because it's almost become a bit of the beat of our year. In November, we see the poppies, we buy one. Just really remind us, what is the purpose of the symbol of what we're wearing?
Well, all the years that we've sacrificed, all the wars, all the conflicts in defence of our country, it just shows people that, the public that buy the poppies, and ourselves as well, that they care. They care what we do for our sacrifice and our time to look after them as the country.
And you've got to wear it very specifically, and you altered mine ever so slightly, so can you explain how?
So the leaf should be at the 11 o'clock position, for the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month, because, the whole Armistice Day.
Baz, thank you very much. Now, lots of people are going to be selling poppies. One of those is drummer Walter. Very good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
Just introduce us to who's this?
This is Seamus, or Turlock Moore, and he is the regimental mascot of the Irish Guards.
So he'll be spending time with you as you encourage the public to buy a poppy. What does it mean for you?
For me, I really remember my great-grandfather. He fought in the Battle of Arnhem in World War II. So it's... and all his comrades who didn't make it back. So it just really reminds and puts emphasis on what we do and why we're selling poppies today.
Today is obviously a special day, and it will be right up until Remembrance Sunday. What does a normal day look like for you?
So me and Seamus will lead all the parades that we do, so like Kingsguard outside Buckingham Palace. We will lead the bands, we will lead the battalion. And afterwards, when we come back, he'll get a bit of a playtime as a reward. Yeah.
Much deserved. Drummer Walsh, thank you very much. So if you come to Horse Guards Parade today, you'll find people like this selling poppies, but also at train stations and tube stations, with the aim of raising £1 million. OK, Rosie, thank you very much indeed for all of that. We've got our poppies on this morning.
I have. Mine's a very special one. This is from the London taxi drivers who drive veterans into the cenotaph on a Sunday. They've been doing it for years. Yeah. I'm hoping to have some of them on my show on Friday.
Yeah. Oh, OK.
It's really good. Then from black cats from all over the country converge and take these veterans to the cenotaphs up and down the country. Isn't that a nice
That's
thing?
lovely. Well, I so love poppies.
Yeah.
I called my littlest child Poppy.
Oh.
So it's nice this time of year, but obviously it's
That's
not
a nice
about...
poppy.
Thank you. Yeah, I like this one. You sort of spend a bit more money on it as a one-off rather than lots of little purchases for the paper ones.
The trouble is the paper ones fall off.
They do fall off. Yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare with presenter dresses. Look, we've got some GB views coming in thick and fast this morning. Accents have really got you going. We were talking about how people experience accent mocking in the workplace and accent anxiety being a real thing. What have people been saying?
Well, Paul says, I used to have a very broad Bristolian accent, then moved 10 miles away and have lived here for 27 years. When I go back to meet up with friends, they always make fun of my accent, saying that I now speak too posh.
Fantastic. Tony says, I live in Suffolk, but when I worked in Essex, they used to call me carrot cruncher or farmer. I didn't mind, though, only banter. We'll have more of those views a little bit later on in the programme. Now, let's turn our attention to all things politics again. The Bank of England preparing today to unveil its latest interest rates in what's expected to be that biggest hike since Black Wednesday 30 years ago. Well, the Labour Party are touting their own economic plans as the correct route to economic stability.
Well, let's speak now to Anneliese Dodds, who's the chair of the Labour Party. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're expecting this 0.75% increase in interest rates then today to try and tackle the problem of inflation. What's Labour's view in all of this?
Well, this news will obviously cause a huge amount of concern to many households, many businesses as well. Of course, lots of families already had their backs against the wall, and now they're going to be seeing, in many cases, their mortgage costs really going through the roof. And this hasn't come about by accident. It hasn't been an act of God. We have had 12 years of low growth, low productivity, low investment, no plan to set that right from the Conservatives now. And ultimately, you're seeing working people and businesses paying the price for that Conservative failure.
Anneliese Dodds, interest rates are rising all around the world. In the Fed yesterday put them up by 0.75% for the 4th month in a row. This isn't peculiar just to Great Britain, is it?
But the nature of the crisis is worse in our country than in many other nations. That is peculiar, I'm afraid, to Conservative-led governments. We've been put in a worse position. Our economy is weaker than many other nations. And as I said, that hasn't come about by accident. It hasn't been an act of God. We haven't had a plan for growth in this country over the last 12 years. If we'd seen the same levels of growth under the Conservatives as we saw under Labour, we would not be in this situation, and the Bank of England wouldn't be put in this situation. I mean, Labour's calling for that plan for growth to be put in place immediately. We need to be right now backing the jobs of the future that we need to see up and down our country in the technologies of the future. We've set out how to achieve that with our Green Prosperity Plan. We're not seeing anything like that, I'm afraid, from the Conservatives. Just the same old tired policies, no change, and ultimately working families are paying the price.
Well, the same old tired policies. Lots of being reported that Rishi Sunak's eyeing up a windfall tax on the energy companies, something that the Labour Party presumably would support.
Well, he really needs to get a move on and put that windfall tax in place because, of course, his government, the Conservative government, chose to borrow more when they had an alternative. They had that alternative to use some of those enormous profits, bumper profits, as they were described earlier in the week, to use some of that money to get costs down for families. They chose instead not to adopt the kind of windfall tax that Labour called for, proper watertight windfall tax. They chose to borrow instead. And we've seen the impact of that on our economy and the impact on economic stability, which of course has been so negative.
Can I ask you, in the mini-budget, one of the proposals was to cut the basic rate of income tax by 1% next year. The Labour Party agreed with that. That was then dropped by Jeremy Hunt. Does the Labour Party still agree that that tax rate should be cut next year?
So we, of course, will assess any plans that come forward from government, and our priority on tax has always been to reduce the burden on working people and to ultimately seek where we need to have additional taxation, that taxation from those with the broadest shoulders. You know, why are we, for example, still giving non-DOMs a different tax treatment to people who've lived here all of their lives? This really is a strange position to be in. We'll assess any tax proposals very carefully. And before the election, if I may, I was just going to say, if we're approaching a general election at that time, as we hope we will be, we need a general election, we will set out our spending plans and exactly how we will pay for them at that stage.
But
we can't do so now. I can't write the manifesto now.
But you were absolutely clear 2 weeks ago you were going to support that 1p cut in income tax rate. You don't appear to be so clear about it now. What's changed?
Well, we'll set out our tax plans for the next general election at the time of the next general election, and we want that general election to happen as soon as possible. At that stage, you'll see our spending and our tax plan.
So sitting on the fence on that one. Look, we're almost out of time, but on the non-DOMs point, I just want to point to what happened when François Hollande came to power in France. He went after the non-DOMs, and what happened? They all up sticks and moved over here. We benefited from that. Do we really want to send them back overseas? Because they are wealth creators. They don't just have a personal independent wealth. They spend that money here, they generate, they employ people.
Well, that hasn't been our experience in Britain. Actually, when we've seen changes to the tax treatment of the very wealthiest, that hasn't led to the kind of exodus that you suggest might have taken place elsewhere. I'm very proud of our country's economy. I think people come here because they see the incredible potential for innovation, our amazing universities, the incredible workforce that we have here. Not a lazy workforce, as some Conservatives have described it, but ultimately a very, very productive workforce. I think that's why people want to come here, who want to create wealth. I don't think it's because they might end up paying less tax, and that needs to be changed.
OK, Anneliese Dodds, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time and braving the weather for us as well on College Green. We appreciate it.
More on what could be the highest hike to interest rates since Black Wednesday back in 1992, coming up after the break.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio,
And online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Bank of England looks set to unveil the biggest hike to interest rates since Black Wednesday.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Thursday the 3rd of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Andrew Pearce.
And a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
Our top story, markets are predicting that today's interest rate hike from the Bank of England could be the biggest in 30 years, pushing rates to 3%. It follows a similar rise in the US last night.
The Prime Minister is reportedly eyeing a tax grab from energy companies to fill a $50 billion budget black hole. The expansion of the windfall tax could be announced in the Chancellor's autumn statement later this month.
The latest GB News' People poll has revealed that more than half of people think the British government has lost control of the country's borders. It comes amid reports that migrants from the Manston Centre are being abandoned by the Home Office on the streets of London.
And dancing for 10 minutes a day, squats and a square of dark chocolate. Dr. Michael Mosley reveals just a couple of things that could change your life and even extend it too.
Oh, I suggest watching GB News could extend your life
Quite
just
right.
a little bit every day. Get in touch, let us know your views this morning. Loads of you getting in touch on accents. Keep them coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, to our top story, the Bank of England will unveil its latest interest rate decision today, with markets expecting it to rise by 0.75%, the biggest hike since Black Wednesday 30 years ago.
Well, the move, which would bring interest rates to 3%, is a response to skyrocketing inflation, which reached a new 40-year high in September.
The move will be especially worrying for homeowners, with those on tracker mortgages facing an almost £900 increase to their payments.
Well, let's go to Downing Street now and get some reflection on all of this from our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, all of this, I suppose, will feed into what the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are preparing in terms of that much-anticipated autumn statement later on this month.
Absolutely. Interest rates became something of a focus for the new Chancellor when he was appointed by the last Prime Minister, and indeed the new Prime Minister when he was appointed only last week. It seems like such a long time ago, but in real terms it's been quite a short while ago. And of course they will be thinking and watching very closely what the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England says at midday today. The people in the building behind me will be watching that very carefully. I have to say the Prime Minister has already been up and early this morning. I was just over in Parliament a little while ago and spotted him selling poppies at Westminster Tube Station. No doubt then driving right back to Downing Street to get on with the rest of his day. But certainly politicians will be watching the Bank of England, independent as it is, and the decisions that it makes today. It's worth remembering that last time round, back in September, the day before the mini-budget, was the last time the Monetary Policy Committee announced their decision, and it came in under expectations, a 0.5% rise when people were expecting a 0.75% rise. Now, many people say that fed into some of the issues that then followed with the mini-budget, a looser monetary policy than many were expecting, and indeed a looser fiscal policy too. That, of course, worried markets. Well, I think it would be highly unlikely for the Bank of England to do something similar this time round, and they will likely follow expectations. But those expectations are still setting a 0.75 increase. It sounds big by historic standards, but it would keep UK rates about 1% lower than US rates. US rates rose to 4% last night, and UK rates are expected to perhaps rise to 3% today. That shows a bit of the global context for where interest rates are headed. But it is interesting to look at the government's fiscal policy. Of course, we're expecting a lot of fiscal tightening when it comes to the 17th of this month and the fiscal statement. What does that mean? Tax rises and spending cuts. It's the government's view that fiscal tightening means that monetary tightening won't have to go quite as far.
Very much indeed.
Well, joining us now is economics commentator Laurie Laird for her insight. Laurie, morning to you. It's a big, big day. We know the rates are going up. Now, he surprised us, the Governor of the Bank of England, last time, didn't he? Because we thought they'd go up 0.75%. They went up 0.5%. Where do you think it will be today?
It's a difficult call because the Bank of England doesn't have all of that fiscal information that Tom just talked about. That would be very helpful in determining interest rates. But I think with the markets now expecting this 75 basis point, 0.75 of a percentage point rise, if the bank doesn't do this, they're going to look like they flubbed it. They're going to look like they aren't telegraphing things very well. So I think the bank has sort of painted itself into a corner here. So I'd be surprised if we saw anything other than 75 basis points, takes interest rates to about 3%. But while this is a massive move, biggest since Black Wednesday, keep in mind 3% on the bank rate is still really low by historical standards. It's just that we have had such low interest rates for so long. And in fact, in the European Union, they were negative for almost a decade. So it feels like a big rise, but historically, we're still at a pretty low level.
We keep going back to Black Wednesday when we came tumbling out of the
Which
exchange
I
rate
actually
mechanism.
remember, and I shouldn't date myself
but
here.
those interest rates went up to something like 15%.
They did, but they came back down in a real hurry, and, and interest rates were only raised for one reason, and that was to lift the value of sterling, because at that point it was artificially pegged to the Deutschmark. That's not the case anymore. We have a floating exchange rate. We don't have to defend it. And do you remember how quickly interest rates came back down? That's the question right now, actually. We know this interest rate hike is coming. We know that there will probably be more interest rate hikes. But how far does the bank go? When do they know they've done enough? Because we know that there's a lag between raising interest rates and when they actually take effect. We know that there's the possibility of a recession coming. Higher interest rates don't help that. How far does the bank go? When do they stop?
Yeah, and I suppose homeowners and people with mortgages thinking, heaven forbid, we're into repossessions territory, or if we're talking about people, on fixed-rate mortgages, I think something 1.5 million on trackers, expecting it to go up to £900.
Absolutely, and we have so many people on variable rate or on fixed rate who will then have to refinance over the next couple of years. This is a really difficult situation for the Bank of England, and in fact, let me digress a bit. The Federal Reserve in the U.S., which is sort of first amongst equals when it comes to central bankers, they raised rates yesterday. The head of the Fed, a guy called Jerome Powell, did a press conference. He actually said, we have very little data on inflation when it's this high in the modern era. Now, I like a little bit of humility out of a public official as much as the next guy, but that scared me a little bit, saying that we don't quite understand how inflation is working right now is a little bit scary, and he's not the only one. I think he's just being a little bit more candid. So the question is, how long will rates stay where they are if we are, in fact, heading into a recession? We haven't seen that recession yet. It's not reflected in the numbers, but I can't find a forecaster who doesn't think that's what's going to happen. Hard to keep raising interest rates if you see a recession, if you see unemployment rising.
Yeah, but if they don't raise interest rates, then inflation will keep rising. Isn't that the point?
That's the theory. But I'm starting to query that a little bit, particularly after hearing Jerome Powell say we don't have that much information. Over the summer, he said we now understand how much we don't understand about inflation, again, which is
a bit worrying that he doesn't understand about inflation.
Honesty, I was so surprised
world's most powerful banker.
that people didn't pick up on this, and thank you for giving me an excuse to shout about it again. But look at some of the countries that started, and there are a lot of countries that started raising interest rates a year before we did. They're smaller countries, Hungary, New Zealand, the Czech Republic. They all have different economic circumstances, but they did recognize inflation. Maybe they have memories of high inflation more recently than we do, but they have been raising interest rates for 18 months. Inflation is still rising there. So I am starting to wonder whether the playbook that we are using may not be totally applicable to the sort of inflation.
There's no manual.
No.
We don't know what we're doing. We're driving blind.
Well, not quite blind.
Okay, good.
But there is a body of knowledge that we're constantly improving upon.
Okay, that's Laurie Laird, economist, talking about those interest rate rise. We'll know at midday.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Thank you so
Great
much.
to talk to you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, look, to get an idea now of how charity donations are responding to the hike, and indeed many small businesses, Theo Jacumba, our GB News national reporter, is in Northamptonshire for us. Good morning to you, Theo.
Good morning. Yes, that's right. We are in Northampton this morning. And of course, as you've been talking about this morning, interest rate, the Bank of England is set to announce its decision around lunchtime today. And of course, the Bank of England were expecting the government, or the Chancellor indeed, to do his statement just a couple of days ago. But we now know it's been delayed until the 17th of November. And of course, what does this mean for charities, businesses and more? This morning, I'm kindly joined by Lee, who's the founder of the Lewis Foundation. Lee, thank you so much for your time this morning. So interest rates, what's been your experience this year in the charity sector?
Well, we've noticed the big donations have gone down by a lot due to interest rates and just harder for people to live. So we've noticed a big increase on donations have gone down by 90%. Charities are starting to really struggle, so we just need to sort of make things better, really.
Has there been a knock-on effect, particularly with people who normally donate to you as well, with things going up for them as well and their pockets being squeezed?
Yeah, so we've noticed that a lot of people are not donating so many items anymore, even donations through cash, not donating so much cash. So we have noticed a big, massive increase on donations going down.
And of course, just tell me about, some of the items you need in order to do your work here. Are they going up as well? And does this mean you have to, rethink things for the near future and for the next couple of weeks as well?
Yeah, so we've noticed a lot of our products have increased in price, but the bigger we get, the sort of prices go down for us because then we buy sort of bulk buy. So that's why we want to help more people and get sort of bigger. But we've noticed that all of our prices of our items have gone up drastically.
Lee, thank you so much for that. And of course, as you heard there from Lee, they are also facing financial challenges, but also those who normally do donate to also feeling their pockets being squeezed as things are getting more expensive.
We're going to turn our attention, though, now to what some described as a screeching U-turn yesterday from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, deciding, after all, that he does want to head to Sharm el-Sheikh this weekend, not for a jolly, but to attend the COP27 climate summit.
He had decided not to go so he could focus on Britain's domestic problems. The change of plan comes amidst reports Sunak is drawing up plans with Chancellor Jeremy Hunt to extend the windfall tax on energy companies to plug the £50 billion budget black hole.
Well, our political reporter, Olivia Utley, joins us. Look, has he had a change of heart and all of this, suddenly seen that a greener future is where it needs to be? Or is this pressure from Boris Johnson?
I think the latter option is more likely. The Prime Minister's been under pressure, not just at home, but abroad as well. I mean, we've had the UN, perhaps unsurprisingly, suggesting that Britain has washed its hands of its climate responsibilities.
Interestingly, his sister works, doesn't she, for the United Nations and involved in COP27, I was reading over the weekend. Sorry if that's a curveball. Yeah, Ms Sunak. Well, anyway, we'll come back to that.
Interesting. And the Egyptian Prime Minister has said that it's that we've ducked our responsibilities. But I think what probably is more interesting is the fact that Rishi Sunak's been under a lot of pressure at home, because a couple of weeks ago it looked like Rishi Sunak was unbreakable in the Tory parliamentary party. He had supporters from all sides of conservatism piling in behind him. But only a few days after that, we had Alok Sharma, who was the president of COP26, doing a very outspoken interview saying that Rishi Sunak was ducking his responsibilities and not going, and that Britain would no longer be a green leader if the Prime Minister doesn't turn up to something like COP27. Then, of course, we have Boris Johnson saying that he's going to attend, which he's claimed was going to be helpful to the Rishi Sunak doesn't seem that helpful at all. And now Rishi's had to make this U-turn. What's quite tricky is that it sounds like it's going to be the first in a series of U-turns. The Prime Minister's spokesperson said yesterday that Rishi Sunak was going to look at all of the pledges that he made in that leadership campaign over the summer and decide whether the time was right for any of them. So Rishi Sunak, who has this image of being a very sort of slick operator, he's got this fantastic media campaign going, as we saw over the summer. Everything he does is so polished. Now could get into some quite ugly situations where Labour are throwing things at him that he's a U-turning Prime Minister.
He got late to the feast, but he was talking about tax cuts, pretty radical tax cuts, wasn't he, during the Tory leadership campaign, bringing, I think, the basic rate of tax down to something like 16p at the end of a parliament.
He was, and we all forget that.
Yeah.
And I think that, in a way, Liz Truss has done him quite a lot of favours because he comes in now, and not only is he not directly, he's not coming after his own reign as Chancellor, he's coming after Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's reign, so he can blame it all on the last guys, which makes things a little bit easier for him. And there's also, I was speaking to one Sunak ally yesterday who made quite an interesting point that Rishi Sunak didn't actually win the leadership campaign over the summer, so he doesn't really have an electoral mandate to carry out any of the promises that he made. What he does have a mandate for is to carry out the promises made in the 2019 general election, which maybe is a little bit of a tenuous way of saying that you're not going to stick to any of your promises, but I can sort of see how it holds water. It gives him a bit of a blank slate.
So there's going to be a lot of Tories very anxious to think how much more he's going to put the tax burden up. Is he going to raise the thresholds? So when dragging a lot more people into the 40p tax rate, that's aspirational Tory voters potentially. It will affect millions.
It will, and what it sounds like he's going to do is freeze the rate at which people are in the higher tax bracket, but obviously against a backdrop of massive inflation. That works out as a stealth tax.
It is a stealth tax.
Exactly. I think that you've got a bit of tension between Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak. It sounds as though Rishi Sunak is a bit less concerned about sort of abacus economics, about plugging that 50 billion black hole exactly. He wants to sort of reassure the markets by proving that he's competent. And we talk about sort of politics by vibe at the moment, that if Rishi Sunak, he thinks that if he can just prove that he's making a valid attempt to balance the books, then that'll reassure the markets. Whereas Jeremy Hunt, it seems, is putting more pressure on him to go further in terms of tax rises and public spending cuts.
Good vibes only.
Yeah. Wow.
Olivia, thank you very much indeed for that. At the Times, 8:17, we're going to bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning. And asylum seekers were reportedly left at London's Victoria Station on Tuesday after being taken out of the Manston Processing Centre in Kent. The Guardian says the group of 11 men were driven to the capital as part of a larger group. Hundreds of people have been moved out of the Manston facility amid concerns it had become dangerously overcrowded.
And a new report examining the emergency response to the Manchester Arena bombing will be published today. It will look at whether any inadequacies contributed to individual deaths. 22 people were killed, hundreds injured in a suicide attack at an Ariana Grande concert in 2017.
The Foreign Secretary will warn allies that Vladimir Putin is plunging the world's poorest further into despair. Speaking at a meeting of G7 foreign ministers in Germany, James Cleverly will stress the need to work together amid economic insecurity driven by the war in Ukraine. Now, at train and tube stations across London today, thousands of Army, Navy and RAF personnel will be joining veterans in asking the public if they'd like to buy a poppy in support of the Royal British Legion. In fact, we were just hearing, weren't we, from Tom Harwood, that the Prime Minister was spotted. Sorry, it was even written in there for us. There he is, a photograph and everything. He was doing a street collection. I think this was Westminster Tube Station early this morning. He's very slick.
Don't think he goes anywhere without a photographer in tow.
Well, he is the PM now.
He is the PM, yeah. Yeah. So the Royal British Legion, of course, is aiming to raise £1 million for the Poppy Appeal just today. Our reporter, Rosie Wright, she's at Paddington Station right now.
I'm not quite. I'm at Horse Guards Parade, just down the road from where the Prime Minister has been handing out poppies. And lots of people here are very keen that when the public come past, we see that symbol and consider buying one ourselves. One person doing that is Ambassador for the Royal British Legion, Ross Kemp. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
What's today actually about?
Oh, today is an opportunity for the British public who are travelling through London to get a chance to come and say thank you to our armed forces personnel. You know, we only really have 11 days in this country where you get the opportunity to buy a poppy, and we have one London Poppy Day. We'll have a Poppy Day in Manchester and in Birmingham and in Bristol. And that's an opportunity to just say thank you to the people who keep us safe and protect us, and people who have made big sacrifices on our behalf to allow us to live in a democracy.
It's quite easy, isn't it? Is it just November comes around, it's kind of like part of the year to forget really what this symbol means?
I think it's very important to remember what it means, and also, you know, I'm not going to force anybody to wear a poppy. You have a democratic right not to wear one because the sacrifices made by people like the people behind me and people like my grandfather and some of my relatives. My grandmother was in a Royal British Legion nursing home for the last 7 years of her life, and the care and the love and the attention that she was given, I will never forget. You've also got to look at the fact at the moment we've had a 20% increase in demands for help in terms of fuel and in food, so £3 million has already been spent on that. In terms of debt relief, we've already paid out £10 million helping veterans and their families with debt issues. And that's not going away. And you have to understand the British Legion doesn't operate for just 11 days. It operates all around the year, and people have problems all around the year. And I just think, you know, for anyone that's served their country or anyone who's associated family-wise with anyone who's served their country, they sort of deserve our help.
Is there a problem that so much support is required, and why isn't that coming from elsewhere?
I think that's always been the case. I mean, you look historically through, you know, we often get involved in conflicts around the world. And that's a decision made by politicians. It is the job of someone in our armed forces to follow orders, and that's what they do. That's what they're trained to do. But often what happens when you come home, those conflicts are often very quickly forgotten, apart from the people that actually served in them. And it's very easy for politicians to draw lines under certain conflicts. It's not so easy for those that have fought in them or for their families to do so.
Ross, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time this morning. So if you are in and around London, at train stations, at tube stations, they are open today. There was going to be a strike, but they thought this is not going to work on the same day as London Poppy Day, so that's been cancelled. So the appeal from the Royal British Legion is to get a poppy today.
Well, make sure you do if you haven't at home already. Thank you so much, Rosie, for that. We appreciate it. Also, lots of views coming in, Andrew, about accents. We've been talking about whether or not people get mocked or indeed worse, bullied for their accents, or whether or not we've all just lost our sense of humour. Adrian says, I'm from Dudley and I have a mild black country accent, but when people ask where my accent is from, I tell them, they repeat back, Dudley, almost implying that I'm thick and stupid. It is offensive.
It is. It is. Samson says, I'm West Sussex born and bred. Not many people speak with a Sussex drawl anymore. I moved to Portsmouth, Hampshire, and was constantly asked if I was an Australian.
Right. And this one from Sue. I once worked with a very posh gentleman in Derbyshire, where I'm from, and every morning he'd greet me, "Hey up, duck," and I used to reply, "Good morning, old fruit." It was a laugh. There you go. Quite like it. We've got to take a break now. We'll be back straight after that with all the details of the latest GB News People's Poll. It reveals 58% of you think the government has lost control of the country's borders. See you in a sec.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News. Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 8:27 still to come on today's programme.
At 8:45, Dr. Michael Mosley is going to tell us about the small things you can do to transform your life from dancing to taking a hot bath.
I love a hot bath.
Yeah, I don't very often have one.
Oh, you should. It's the best. Anyway, 9:15, we're going to be speaking to the 18-year-old female darts champion, Bo Greaves, nicknamed Bow and Arrow, because she's qualified for the Darts World Championship next month. Good to see women breaking through into this.
Absolutely. Terrible sport, I think.
It is. But anyway.
And of course, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews.
Now, as the migrant crisis continues, the latest GB News People's poll has revealed that 58% of you think the British government has lost control of the country's borders, with only 14% thinking the government is in control.
On the issue of Albanian migrants, 61% of you think they should be asked to return to Albania.
And 49% of people think nobody who arrives unlawfully to the UK by small boat from a safe country should be allowed to stay.
And the poll comes amid reports that the Home Office abandoned migrants from the Manston Processing Centre outside Victoria Station in London this week. This is all part of an effort to ease pressure on the facility.
Well, we're joined now by academic and Professor of Politics Matt Goodwin, who put this poll together. Good morning to you. Look, if the Home Secretary were to look at our poll this morning, do you think she'd feel emboldened to continue on her path?
I think the poll is certainly a reminder that the conversation we often have in London is not the conversation that the rest of the country are having. So in that sense, I do think the Home Secretary will take some comfort from these findings. For example, much of the country thinks that the government is no longer controlling Britain's borders, but almost 3/4 of Conservative voters, those very voters that Rishi Sunak needs to win back, no longer think the government is in control. And to me, this is some pretty clear evidence that actually much of the country is looking for a pretty tough, clear and concerted approach to actually resolving this issue.
Is that what Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, is tapping into with her, some might say, inflammatory language, but she's pretty gung-ho, isn't she, in the way she's arguing this case in the Commons?
Well, Andrew, just on the language point, I think this is also worth remembering. There was some other polling by a different firm earlier this week that actually put Suella Braverman's description of the events to the British public. And 3/4 of Conservative Party voters felt that her language was entirely appropriate. And the wider country was basically split down the middle. 43% said she was appropriate to refer to the events as she did. 44% said that she was inappropriate. So I just think whenever we have these conversations, we tend to have those conversations framed by a small minority of the country. But when you look at, for example, what people want to do with Albanian migrants, when you look at what they want to do with asylum seekers who have already passed through a safe country, they are holding views and attitudes that are often not shared by many of the people who are shaping this national debate about Britain's asylum crisis. And that's why we did this poll. That's why we asked these questions, because we need to, I think, spend a bit more time talking about the forgotten majority in the country and a little bit less time dwelling on the attitudes of a small minority that tend to dominate parts of the media.
Speaking up for what you might call the silent majority, I'm talking about the Home Secretary here.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at what Suella Braverman's been trying to do, if you look at, she clearly wants to expand the Rwanda deal. She wants to adopt a tough approach on processing. She wants a bespoke route for Albanian migrants. All of that stuff generally is very, very popular among her core Conservative Party voters. And Andrew, one other point that I just want to make briefly. Just look at global politics for a minute. Sweden, Italy, America, all of those countries have got similar crises on the border. And it's the parties that really offer a robust response to those crises that tend to pick up support at the next election.
Very interesting.
Speaking of support at elections, the People's Poll also looked at which leader would be best in order to cope with the current crisis. They were talking about none of the above, or Nigel Farage, Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak. What did you find from that?
Well, surprise, surprise, the most popular answer is none of the above. People are completely alienated with the established politicians on both the left and the right. But when you just put those voters to one side and you look at the people who have actually made a choice, number one is Nigel Farage. And that's also, by the way, among those 2019 Conservatives, about 28% of those voters choose Nigel Farage as their first choice. And then Rishi Sunak, well behind, actually, on 6% among Conservatives. So, look, if I was in number 10 Downing Street presenting these findings to the Prime Minister, as I've done in the past, I'd be saying, look, Mr. Sunak, if you don't get a grip of this crisis, you have absolutely no chance of winning the next election. It's game over for the Conservative Party unless you can come out and get your arms around this crisis and start delivering the things that your voters want you to deliver.
Matt Goodwin, academic and professor of politics, behind this People's Poll for us. Thank you very much indeed for explaining it all. We appreciate it.
I think he's quite right, by the way, what he said about the Tories' election prospects. If they don't sort it out, they're doomed. Now, after the break, we're going to be going through the papers again with Freddie Gray and Claire Pearsall.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now. Delighted to say joining us this morning is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell. Morning to you both again.
Good morning.
Now, Freddie, Joe Biden, oh my God. Oh my God. What's he doing now? Please tell me he's going to stand down.
No, he's not.
Right.
No, he's not. The story is he's going to run again. He's got, in the Times, page 30 of the Times, he's got a close set of advisors, including his wife Jill, who assure him that he's going to win again in 2024. This is against the backdrop of his obvious decline mentally.
Yes.
It's not nice to talk about it, but it is true that he is struggling mentally. Yesterday he claimed he'd met the inventor of insulin, who was dead long before.
Who did he mean?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, nobody quite knows. I met Joe Biden in 2020 when he was campaigning, and very briefly, but I could tell that there was something wrong with him.
Yeah.
He wasn't processing things properly.
And he's 80 now. Young people are going to find it very difficult to relate to an 80-year-old president who's then going to run for a second term when he'll be 82.
Well, young people are quite fond of him.
Right.
He's actually always polled surprisingly well, although that has declined quite dramatically in recent weeks. And very importantly, the big factor in American politics is suburban women. They seem to sway elections, and he's falling like a stone with them at the moment.
Because?
The economy.
Right.
The economy. He keeps talking about the economy being really strong, and yet there's very dramatic inflation. So voters are very confused and angry about it.
Why would they be advising him to go again, given the backdrop, the mood music, which is that things aren't looking great for him anyway? Would it actually be bad for the Democrats if they replaced him? Or, I mean, there must be an electoral reason.
Lack of better options.
Really, though?
Kamala Harris.
That is the best that... I mean, obviously, Kamala Harris is way more divisive, but there has to be... And I think the argument, a lot of people would say the same for the Republicans, and sometimes people say it here in the UK as well, but is this the best we can do? Is politics changing so much that only a certain type of person's attracted to?
That nice gay mayor.
Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's
looking
often talked about. Unfortunately, polls very badly among African Americans. 0%. Quite possibly.
Yeah.
One could say that.
Yeah.
He polled 0% among African Americans.
What was his name?
Pete Buttigieg.
Buttigieg, yes.
I think partly people found it hard to pronounce his name.
I always just thought Buttigieg.
But he's only been a mayor, for heaven's sake. He's never been a governor or...
What's absolutely staggering about American politics for the last 20 years has been the lack of talent at the highest level, considering what a large and dynamic population it is.
Maybe they should send for Hillary Clinton again.
Oh, I think that would be even more divisive.
She hasn't given up. You know that.
I do know that.
There in the background, but I do find it quite outstanding with American politics that this is, as you say, this is what they have. This is the best of the best in a country that size. But you can understand, looking at politics as a whole, why would you want to go into it?
Well,
the amount of grief that you get in this country. Look at what happens in America.
Of course, we only get the best. Liz Truss, of course, at the top.
Well, didn't she?
Tell us about the story. Oh, Freddie, you chose this. I'm sorry. You chose this in the Mirror.
Well, they're burning an effigy of her, which is not very pleasant or nice. I suspect they started building it while she was in office, and it felt like a good protesty thing to do. But now it feels rather cruel, doesn't it?
Possibly. Well, I mean, a lot of mortgages...
Look, and they've got a lettuce on her shoulder.
But she's carrying a cardboard box with a copy of her budget and a T-shirt that says, "I'm a fighter, not a quitter."
I can see some cheese.
The attention to detail is quite
clever.
outstanding.
Yeah.
And a T-shirt, sort of the equivalent of "Make Great Britain Great Again." And there's a Larry the cat at the bottom showing his
Don't burn the
worst
cat.
Abject,
No, absolutely.
I mean, where does she... abject humiliation. She's very bruised, I hear, and in a bad way emotionally. What could she do next?
And I think that's the real problem. Politics is brutal, and I feel sorry for her as a person.
Yeah.
I think her and her family have been through an awful lot, and this is really quite nasty. As a politician, I don't feel sorry for her at all, because this is the job that you wanted so badly, and you messed this up. But I think that her career options are going to be limited after this. I'm not sure
She's
the
not exactly
after-dinner
gonna...
circuit...
No, it doesn't beckon, does it? Because she's probably the worst public speaker in number 10 ever.
Yeah, no, I think so, and it's unfortunate. So unless she can change that, I'm not sure that she's got much.
She'll have the PM salary for the rest of her life. Her husband has a job. They'll still be better off than most people in this country.
Daleks don't make good public speeches.
She can write a book.
She could, yeah.
Another one.
Another one? Yeah.
Britannia rechained.
Yeah, exactly. Let's read about Bounty chocolate, shall we? In fact, no, I'm going to go to Claire on Christmas turkeys, because we haven't come to you on one of yours yet.
The Christmas turkey. I mean, this is always a joy, isn't it? We're going to have
Christmas hardy annual.
But the avian flu outbreak has wiped out tens of thousands of birds, and farmers are now putting out a warning saying that you may not be able to get such things as a fresh turkey for your Christmas lunch, because so many birds have now been culled with the flu that I think you're going down the realms of finding an alternative or going to a frozen turkey, which won't have had the same issues. And it's just, it just seems one of those things. Christmas is always, you know, let's look forward to Christmas. Oh, hang on a minute. There's either going to be a lockdown or there's now going to be no turkeys and you can't have a Christmas tree and whatever it is. So it's always one of these sort of annual things. But I do feel very sorry for the farmers. I mean, this is a really big outbreak and I don't think that we've paid enough attention to it. And I wonder if that's a little bit of the pandemic sort of washing over us and we're all going, yeah, I'm not buying another outbreak of anything at the moment.
How would you cope without turkey?
I don't eat meat, so I'm largely not affected by this.
What about
goose is off the menu too, which I'm sad about. I like a goose.
Do you?
Yeah.
I find it a bit greasy.
But I do think this bird flu epidemic, it's a really, really big story.
Yeah,
as Claire says, I mean, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I think people would be a lot more worried about it.
Well, it came up in the Commons yesterday, didn't it? And Rishi Sunak said that they were going to be paying compensation for farmers that were being affected by it. But yeah, as you say, the timing couldn't be worse with Christmas around the corner. But there are other things that you can eat at Christmas. I don't know why we're all obsessed with birds. You know, I'm quite happy to have a roast.
My mother-in-law...
nut roast?
No, I was going to say you could have a slow roast pork or something overnight.
No, my husband and son, they did have steak last year. They wanted fillets. Yeah, so you got a fillet of beef.
Did you have to cook them?
I cooked it, yeah.
Even though you don't eat meat?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to cook it. It doesn't bother me at all. But they had that as an alternative.
Right. Now, what's this about chocolate mutiny? We've got to get to the bottom of this.
Well, bounties are apparently very unpopular in celebrations, the sort of mixed packs.
Do you like bounties?
I don't understand the problem with bounties.
Bounties?
I like them.
Yes, definitely.
I'm indifferent, so we're sort of...
So we think, Claire and I discussed before, we think it might be a generational thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I think if you're under 30, you don't get the bounty.
Oh, OK.
Because I think we were very successfully targeted by advertising, that it was a sort of exotic, exciting chocolate.
The coconuts,
in the 80s.
It had palm trees.
Yes,
beaches,
you would see the swaying palm trees,
yeah,
wouldn't you?
so I think that we were sold on that it was
Yeah.
some kind of exotic. It would transport us out to a Caribbean island.
So they're expelling them from what, the selection box?
They will not be in some of the celebration boxes.
It is
a travesty.
It's a trial.
What do you think at home?
Just a bounty-only one.
Yes, we could have just... Yes, that's a good idea.
That'd be very efficient.
For the over 30s.
Yeah.
Right, let us know at home. Are you outraged or delighted to see the end of a bounty in your chocolate? Was it a celebrations box that you...
Celebrations
box. Let us know your thoughts on that. Look, guys, we have to leave it there. It's been an absolute pleasure. Claire Pearsall, Freddie Gray, thank you very much. We'll see you both again soon, I hope. It's 8:45. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour.
Asylum seekers reportedly left at London's Victoria Station on Tuesday after being taken out of the Manston processing centre in Kent. The Guardian says the group of 11 men were driven to the capital as part of a larger group. Hundreds of people have been moved out of the Manston facility amid concerns it had become dangerously overcrowded.
A new report examining the emergency response to the Manchester Arena bombing will be published today. It will look at whether any inadequacies contributed to individual deaths. 22 people were killed and hundreds injured in a suicide attack at an Ariana Grande concert in 2017.
And Royal Mail has released a final Christmas stamp collection to feature the Queen's silhouette. Oh, that's really... Oh, wow. The set of 6 stamps depicts key images from the Nativity story, including the journey to Bethlehem and the Magi being guided by the shining star. I want those.
More to collect stamps, is it? As a child, we collected stamps. Is that weird?
I had stamps too.
Yeah,
I don't know where they are.
I don't know where they are. Probably quite valuable.
Yeah, they might be.
But those ones, as you say, collector's item. Last
Yeah.
ones with Her Majesty on.
Oh, no.
End of an era. Look, we're talking and have been talking all morning. You've been doing your just one thing a day, haven't you? You're
Swinging my medicine ball. You've
thrusting,
got
you said, in your front room.
Yeah, I do it. And I have GB News on while I'm doing
Quite
it.
right.
Obviously watching you and Eamonn. And I did it this morning at a very, very early hour.
Yes, and so what inspired you to do this?
Because I used to go to the gym, but because of COVID, I never went back to the gym. So I've just bought some stuff. I thought I'm going to do stuff at home and in the garden.
And obviously, Dr. Michael Mosley, who we're about to speak to, he's in your paper often quoted. So we are delighted to welcome him onto our programme this morning to talk about just one thing. So tell us all about these everyday tricks that can really work to boost our health. What would be, I suppose, your top 3?
OK, so the reason I wrote just one thing is because it essentially makes learning a new behaviour and sticking with it much easier. Originally, it was a podcast. I've just written the book, which has just been published, and that includes 30 just one things, and they're kind of my top favourites, if you like. And they're the basis of many, many years of research, but the idea is they're essentially easy to do. So one of the top one things is actually doing what I call resistance exercises first thing in the morning, and that's press-ups and squats. So I did those. This is me dancing, yeah. Dancing's up there with just one things. I interviewed a very enthusiastic neuroscientist who used to be a ballet dancer, and she was very keen on that. Here I am doing some squats. The squat is probably the best single exercise you can do because it works the muscles in your bottom and thighs, which are the kind of biggest muscles in your body. And also it leads to an increased surge of blood to your brain. And this is me having a shower, a cold shower. I'm not sure if either of you are fans of cold showers, but
No.
I am a fan of Wim Hof. And so that's what I do first thing in the morning. I get out of bed, I do my press-ups and squats, and then I have a cold shower, and then I go for a walk. And while I'm in the cold shower, I also sing very, very loudly.
I don't know. Are you single? I just feel sorry. I feel sorry for whoever's cohabiting with you, singing and freezing. She loves it too. In all seriousness, though, I love the idea of Wim Hof and all of his freezing suggestions, but I am like a reptile. I hate being cold, and I know there are health benefits to it, but I can't do it. How long are you in a cold shower for?
Only about 30 seconds, enough to sing a couple of verses of something, 30 to 40 seconds. So I start off in the warm shower, and then I turn it to cold. And it's a good thing if you can involve your spouse, because then, or your partner, because then they will do it with you. And there is some very decent science behind it. I mean, the great thing about just one thing, and as I said, the new book has 30 just one things, is you don't have to do them all. Indeed, I wouldn't encourage you to do them all. They are my top 30, if you like.
Yeah.
And they include much pleasanter things, you'll be pleased to know, like eating a square of dark chocolate.
Right.
So
Can I just say, Michael, if I involved my partner in the cold shower and singing routine at 7 in the morning, it would be certain divorce.
Absolutely, but give you something to talk about.
Yeah.
But it's surprising.
But why
I would
the
have said
singing?
a year ago, cold showers, absolutely not. But now I've got into them.
But what does the singing do, apart from probably irritate your wife?
The singing is a really good mood booster. There is a lot of evidence that singing also helps control pain. They've done studies in patients with arthritis and other conditions, and they find that the singing leads to a surge of what's called endocannabinoids. Now, these are cannabis-like substances which your body naturally produces. And a few years ago, I was involved in an experiment where we got a group of people to either sing together in a choir or to cycle madly for half an hour or to read instructions from a washing machine manual. They were kind of the control group. And what we found is the people who sang together, they got this big burst of endocannabinoids in their system. And that seemed to be one of the reasons why singing lifts you and fills you with joy, particularly if you do it with other people. And as I said, it's a great way to combat the shock of the cold.
You see, I've always wanted as an adult to join an adult choir, but I'm a bit traumatised because when I was at school, I'll never forget Mr. Ma, my music teacher, taking me to one side after choir practice and telling me to study the music at home. Because although I was giving it lots of gumption, wasn't quite hitting the notes, I loved it, but apparently it wasn't quite what they were after. Anyway, look, what is it about the human psyche that says we only can really handle one thing to change our lives? There's something sort of palatable about it that I suppose we're sort of a bit scared of taking on too much or too busy. I don't know.
I think it's probably that we have all these habits which drive us through the day, and habit is incredibly powerful. So introducing something, one small thing. If you decide you're going to run the marathon, many people are never going to do it. They're just not going to get there. So it's simpler if you can do something which really only takes a few minutes or which has a very, very clear objective. Now, the thing I am best known for is having invented the 5-2 diet. Intermittent fasting. I did that 10 years ago to reverse my diabetes. Now, intermittent fasting has a very, very simple idea at the heart of it. 5-2. 2 days where you cut your calories. So that is a very clear message. In the book, my current book, what I look at is actually a thing called time-restricted eating, which again has a very clear message. See if you can do what's called 12-12. See if you can go 12 hours without eating overnight. So stop eating at about 8 o'clock. Don't start eating again until 8 the next morning. And if you do that, there are some very clear benefits. And it's kind of, achievable. So that's, I think, why the just one thing approach works very well. And you kind of build it up. Most of the things in the just one thing are things you can do very fast. Eat press-ups and squats, you can get it over with in a couple of minutes. Cold shower, done in under a minute. Eating a square of chocolate, well, that's enjoyable, and again, it's done in less than a minute. And all of these things have a lot of science behind them. So in the book, I kind of describe how to do it. I also have a section of science justifying why you might want to do it, and I stress very strongly, I do not expect you to do all of them. So if you are a reptile, then clearly
one little question for you. Michael, one little question for you. Do you do anything that's unhealthy?
Oh, yes, absolutely, all the time. The things I do that are unhealthy is, given half a chance, I will eat biscuits and milk chocolate. So I cannot have them in the house because otherwise I will eat them. I have zero willpower. So that is the other thing about these things. They have to become a habit so that you don't actually need to exert willpower to do them.
But backed by science, that's what it's all about, I suppose, because I was thinking one thing a day that improves your mood, alcohol. Probably not good for my health, though.
Vodka's all right, isn't it?
Red wine.
Red wine's the way to go.
What about vodka? What about my vodka?
Vodka, not so much, no. Red wine has these substances in them which are called flavonols.
I don't like the sound of that.
From the plant. And that actually, modest amounts of red wine, and that's the word modest, isn't it? It's always the word modest.
Yeah.
Yes, moderation. Dr. Michael Mosley, thank you so much for talking to us this morning. Fascinating. I didn't know you were behind the 5-2.
Yeah.
All credit to you. Thank you so much.
I've got the book. I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
Just one thing.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. We're going to take a break. After that, we're going to be speaking to the Minister of State for Climate. That's Graham Stewart. We're talking to him about Rishi's rumoured plan to expand the windfall tax on another U-turn. See you in a moment.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGivern here with the forecast. More rain for some of us today. Brighter skies for many compared with yesterday, but there are further showers coming our way. And for the southeast, some more persistent rain because Wednesday's system, well, the low pressure at least is clearing to the north, but its lingering weather front is sticking around for some time across East Anglia and the southeast. And as a result, it's a wet start for London, East Anglia, southeast England. That rain will come and go, I think, through the day. It could cause some issues on the roads because 20, 30, perhaps 40 millimetres of rain accumulating through the day. Well, that might be troublesome. Further west, brighter skies, yes, but further showers pushing through, particularly across western parts of the UK. I think northeast Scotland faring well for sunshine and predominantly drier weather, and all areas feeling a bit cooler compared with recent days, 10 or 11 in the north and 13 or 14 further south. Now, the showers, if anything, get going a bit more during the evening and overnight, especially across parts of Wales, into the southwest of England, and then later across southern counties of England. Hail and thunder, always a possibility, gusty winds as well, and the risk of some, well, high rainfall totals in a short space of time across southern counties of England. Elsewhere, clearer skies are moving in, lighter winds, and as a result, Friday starts off colder compared with recent mornings. In fact, you probably have to go back to the second week of October to see a morning as cold as this. Touch of frost in places, -3 or -4 Celsius in some sheltered spots in the north. But a bright start, plenty of blue skies out there. Once any early showers have cleared from the south, there will be further showers coming in from the northwest, but actually a decent amount of sunny spells in between those showers. And it's a colder day compared with recent days. Again, you have to go back to the beginning or the second week of October, but temperatures will start to edge upwards this weekend as further areas of low pressure move in. Wet and windy on Saturday, blustery showers on Sunday, highs of 14 Celsius.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News Channel.
The Bank of England looks set to unveil the biggest hike to interest rates since Black Wednesday.
Good morning. It's just after 9 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 3rd of November. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Markets are predicting today's interest rate hike from the Bank of England could be the biggest in 30 years, pushing rates to 3%. It follows a similar rise in the US only last night.
The Prime Minister is reportedly eyeing a tax grab from energy companies to fill a £50 billion budget black hole. The expansion of the windfall tax could be announced in the Chancellor's autumn statement later this month.
And the latest GB News People's poll has revealed that more than half of people think the British government has lost control of the country's borders. I have to admit it has. It comes amid reports that migrants from the Manston Centre are being abandoned by the Home Office on the streets of London.
And she's the 18-year-old female darts champ preparing to take on the world's best. We'll be speaking to the youngest female competitor, Bo Greaves, also known as Bow and Arrow, see what they did there, ahead of the tournament.
Get in touch and let us know what you think of the big stories making the news today. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
So our top story this morning, the Bank of England will unveil its latest interest rate rise today, with markets expecting it to rise by 0.75%. That will be the biggest hike since Black Wednesday 30 years ago.
And the move will bring interest rates to 3%, a response to skyrocketing inflation rates, which reached a new 40-year high in September.
Well, it's worrying news for homeowners, especially those on tracker mortgages, facing an almost £900 increase to their payments. Our political reporter Olivia Utley joins us in the studio this morning. Look, I suppose politically, this is an interesting one because we were expecting to get that autumn update. I think it was tomorrow, or was it originally around this time?
Monday.
It's been moved.
Monday.
Right, Monday.
Yeah.
And now it's the 17th of November. They'll be very interested, although probably have an insight into what's going to be announced at midday because of what they're going to be announcing in the autumn statement.
Yes, and the background to this, well, the immediate background to it is that the US has raised interest rates up to 4%. We look like we're going to be raising them to 3%. And by historic standards, of course, that's still quite low. The problem is that low interest rates have been embedded into our financial system for so long now that this hike will proportionately affect mortgages an enormous amount. And Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are very deeply aware of that. And they know that, well, yes, if interest rates go up, obviously the bright side is that inflation will go down, which will ease the cost of living crisis a bit. But if they're imposing, you know, huge tax hikes on ordinary working people and they're cutting public sector spending, the last thing they want is for mortgages to be going up by, I think it's an average of £84 a month, which will just make the cost of living crisis even worse. So although on the face of it, the Bank of England finally coming to terms with the fact that inflation isn't transitory, which is what they were saying throughout the whole pandemic, and that it's actually here to stay. You'd think that might be helpful for the politicians, but actually it probably isn't.
It's difficult too, isn't it? Because, Olivia, the interest rate rises, they're rising all around the world. They are, as we see, they're higher in America. But because of the response to the Truss budget, the mini-budget, how the markets were spooked, the Tories are probably going to have to own quite a lot of the blame for more people's mortgages going up, and that's going to be very politically difficult for the Tories on the doorstep, local elections, general election, and Labour will play it for all it's worth.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, you know, the US interest rates are now at 4%, which is really incredibly high. And we know that mortgages are skyrocketing there. Around most of the world, the same thing's happening. I mean, definitely in Denmark, inflation's at 17%. So they're going to be raising interest rates enormously there. But as you say, the Truss furore means that the Tories are going to be taking the blame for this. And although in the sort of Westminster bubble, people are saying, well, Rishi Sunak always said the right thing. He, all the way through the leadership campaign, said that if you move this fast and this dramatically, then the market's going to be really spooked and mortgage rates are going to go up. And so he's not really to blame for it. Outside of the Westminster bubble, people just think another Tory that's why we're in all of this chaos, and that distinction isn't clearly made.
Liv, I want to talk about what's on the front of the Times this morning, this reporting that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are contemplating and sort of heading towards another windfall tax on the big energy companies to try and get us out of this financial black hole. I mean, not a Conservative approach generally in a normal circumstance, certainly a long way from what Liz Truss was talking about a few weeks ago. Is this a good move, a shrewd move from him?
Well, as far as he's concerned, it's low-hanging fruit. No one feels for the energy companies. No one's going to be... Their hearts aren't going to be bleeding for poor Shell down a few £1 million because of higher taxes. And so you can understand why he's done it when he's considering other completely politically unpalatable tax rises. This one seems quite straightforward. But the other side of it is obviously that we're supposed to be in... Liz Truss, one of the things which, by most accounts, she got right was that the UK needs a pro-growth strategy, and pushing huge amounts of tax on businesses like Shell, who can choose to operate in other countries and can choose to get out of the UK if their tax burden is too high, isn't a particularly pro-growth policy. And it also spooks other businesses who will think that if you have a Conservative Party that's basically saying that profit is bad, profit should be punished, then what's the point in them operating here in the UK? And the whole point of Brexit, as far as someone like Rishi Sunak was concerned, was to make the UK able to choose its own tax rules and make the UK a competitive place in which to do business. And a move like this, although it might make sense in the short term, could well spook businesses.
And I suppose it's the same argument with the banks and the big profits they're making at the moment. And, you know, they're criticising the suggestions from Labour of going after the non-DOMs, saying, well, they'll just move overseas. Same could be said, as you say, for these energy companies and for the big banks as well. What about Suella Braverman? We can't have a chat with you without talking about her. We've talked a lot about her use of language. But, I mean, now seeing these people being moved from Manston, which obviously an illegal situation happening there, and just dumped on the streets of London. You've been saying it's a metaphor, haven't you?
A metaphor for everything that's going wrong with processing the asylum claims. I mean, how on earth do they manage to dump people who can barely speak a word of English, just some of them wearing flip-flops, not in winter clothes, in outside Victoria railway station? Extraordinary.
I know.
And it was only the police and some Syrian locals were able to come to their aid. Appalling.
Yeah. It sounds like the problem was that Suella was unwilling to sign off hotel stays for migrants because it's obviously not particularly good optics for her if she wants to be the Home Secretary that's tough on our borders. To be paying £7 million a day for migrants to be staying in four-star hotels isn't a great look. But she sort of didn't do anything at all. She buried her head in the sand and let this problem get out of control. And once the backlog has built up, we are obliged under international treaty to consider every request for political asylum, however spurious that request might appear. So once the backlog's built up, processing those migrants takes an awfully long time. And then once you process them, you've got an army of human rights lawyers ready to try and defend any migrant who says that their claim for asylum should have been upheld.
Why does it take so long? We heard in the Commons yesterday, didn't we? 4% of asylum seekers had their claims processed last year. 450 days was the average time it takes for a claim to be...
It's ridiculous.
I mean, we talk about how long it takes to get your passport sorted.
Is it the
shortage of staff?
Is it civil servants being really unhelpful?
Well, as far as I can
understand... Priti Patel always said every time she tried to do something as Home Secretary, she had her arms tied behind her back by her civil servants.
Yes, and the Home Office, we know, is completely dysfunctional. Lots of people say that the department is just too big, it's in charge of too much, and it's not really possible to carry out all of its functions. Another issue, of course, is the Modern Slavery Act, which was, as far as Theresa May was concerned, the sort of crowning jewel of her premiership. But it's ended up being quite a big loophole in our immigration system. So you've got these migrants coming over here, lots of them from Albania, which, of course, isn't a war-torn country by any stretch of the imagination, requesting political asylum here, who should be automatically turned away, pretty much, but instead are claiming that they are victims of modern slavery. And once a claim has been made to be a victim of modern slavery, it has to be looked into, which I think is what's causing this massive build-up.
Fascinating. Well, thank you for joining. That's Olivia Utley, our political correspondent. Thanks so much for joining us.
For more now, though, on how the interest rate rise could impact everything from charity donations to property prices, we're going to hear from Theo Chikomba.
meeting the needs of cancer patients in hospital, the Lewis Foundation in Northamptonshire delivers gift bags to patients in oncology wards. For charities like this one, cash is king. What impact will an interest rate rise mean for them?
Because what we're finding is donations have significantly decreased, especially since the interest rates keep rising. And I'll say over the last, 3 to 4 months, we've noticed a drop of about 90% in our donations. And for us as a charity that are providing these gift packs and our service for free to patients, that has a financial impact on us. Our concern is long term, if this doesn't get sorted out, then people like us cannot provide the service to the patients and they really need our support.
It's not just charities, homeowners and potential buyers are facing increasing costs too. Interest rates are reflected by the mortgage rate offered by lenders, which makes mortgages more expensive for borrowers. So, should people be worried?
With obviously interest rates going up and more importantly the level of stress testing going up, and by stress testing I mean the rate at which the lenders will assess the affordability, shall we say, of prospective buyers, that naturally of course that's going to lead to a price correction. Not necessarily a crash, but a price correction. So I'd say my message to homeowners in today's market is that they just need to be a little bit more open and realistic to the true value of their property moving forward, because of course if the affordability isn't there for the buyer, then the transactions aren't going to be able to happen.
Meanwhile, back at the Lewis Foundation, demand is increasing. They're now delivering to 16 hospitals, including Northampton General.
And we've found that there is a real need for adult cancer patients as they go through treatment. A lot of people can't afford to buy the basic things that keeps them going, like a book to pass the time or their toiletries that they need whilst they're in hospital. But they also want the company and someone to spend time talking with them too. And it's not something that the NHS can provide. So we provide this additional service, and what we've found is that people really need it, and that has led to our charity growing as much as it has over the last 6 years.
At a time when household and business finances are under pressure, a higher rate will make it more expensive to borrow and encourage people to save, as the Bank of England attempts to curb high inflation. Theo Chkomba, GB News.
Coming up, we'll be speaking to 18-year-old darts superstar Bo Greaves as she prepares for the Darts World Championship next month. What a story.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News. Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Now, when you think darts, the immediate image that springs to mind is a group of lads, often with beer bellies, if I can say so, in the local pub.
But someone who's breaking that mould is 18-year-old Bo Greaves, who has just become the youngest woman to play at the PDC World Championships at Alexandra Palace in London next month. And we're delighted to say Bo joins us this morning. Good morning to you. Look, I love to see women breaking barriers and breaking into fields traditionally dominated by men. What was it about darts that attracted you?
I don't know, I started with my brother used to play and I was never a girly girl. I just sort of started in the bedroom and when I was 10 it just went from there, really.
Were you better than your brother very quickly?
You know, no, he was a lot better than me and I was always struggling to beat him, and then since nowadays it's more or less I'm beating him all the time, but yeah, it's good competition and we have a laugh, so it's all good.
And what about the atmosphere? I mean, look, you say you're not a girly girl, but it is a male-dominated, not only sport, but it's a male-dominated crowd. I've watched the darts. It's like being on a giant stag do. Everybody's singing, everybody's drinking. I mean, doesn't worry you. You're toughing it out.
I'm not bothered. Obviously, I started playing in the pubs when I was about 10, and I've been doing that ever since. And yeah, I am looking forward to it. I think that is what you get with darts, and I like that about it. It's quite chill, and yeah, hopefully I'll have good fun on the stage.
And Bo, do you do what the men do? Because when I've watched it occasionally on sport programmes, the male players are often drinking pints. Do you do that too?
Oh, I'm not a pint drinker. I can't do that stuff. But
oh, right.
Yeah, I think everyone has a bit of a drink, and it's nice to just enjoy yourself because it is one of them sports where you need to be relaxed and stuff. And
do you prefer to play? Do you prefer to play against a man or a woman, or doesn't it matter to you?
I'm not bothered. I think as long as I just play my game, then I should be all right. But yeah, I've played against women for a lot of years now, but obviously started against the men. So yeah, it should be fun, and hopefully it's a good game.
Well, you go, girl. I mean, how far do you think you could go in all of this?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I was happy just to get there. I thought that was good enough for me. But
and that's, I suppose,
yeah.
you know, that's coming through very much from you, that you like the sort of chilled atmosphere about it. You've got a chilled approach to it. That might be your sort of poker, you know, your strength, I suppose. What am I trying to say? Your sort of secret weapon is that you're very relaxed about it all. Is the whole industry sort of supporting other women? Are there other girls coming behind you? Are you sort of the trailblazer, or is this the start of a big shift?
Oh, there's been obviously a few ladies that have played there before me, and obviously we've got a good events going now to sort of help us get there. And obviously there's a lot of youth coming through. That's always good to see, and because they're going to be the next ones to do it. And yeah, it's nice to obviously have that support from everyone. And yeah, it's a good community of darts, and obviously everyone was really happy for me when I got there. So,
what's it easier to hit? Is it easier to hit the bullseye, the 50, or the double top 20 at the top?
Showing off now.
Yeah.
Well, I hate double tops. I'm going to say bullseye to be fair. Yeah. So yeah, anything really. They're all the same size, more or less.
Well, look, we wish you all the very best. We come back and let us know how you get on, and we'd love to support you on this journey. And, yeah, let us know.
Very good luck.
Yeah, Bo Greaves, thank you very much. Women's World Champion, World Darts Federation. Thank you.
Time is now 9:21.
It is indeed. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour.
A new report examining the emergency response to the Manchester Arena bombing will be published today. It's going to look at whether any inadequacies contributed to individual deaths. 22 people were killed and hundreds injured in a suicide attack at the Ariana Grande concert in 2017.
The Foreign Secretary will warn allies that Vladimir Putin is plunging the world's poorest further into despair. Speaking at a meeting of G7 foreign ministers in Germany, James Cleverly will stress the need to work together amid economic insecurity driven by the war in Ukraine.
And a new survey has revealed the issue Brits are most worried about in the NHS. Long waiting times are top of people's concerns, with poor emergency response times also high on the list.
And Royal Mail has released a final Christmas stamp collection to feature the Queen's silhouette. The set of 6 stamps depict key images from the Nativity story, including the journey to Bethlehem and the Magi being guided by the star. Each stamp also has a barcode which customers can scan to watch a festive video. I think it's going to be a bit of a collector's item, Matt.
I'm definitely going to get some.
Yeah, absolutely.
We love the Queen.
We do. So you've all been getting in touch throughout the programme on a whole range of topics,
Yes.
haven't they? What have people been saying?
Claire makes a very good point. Will they replace the bounty bars with something else, or just reduce the contents and charge the same price? Good
point. Yeah, don't want shrinkflation in all of this. Lots of you getting in touch about COP27. Colin says, I think Sunak's U-turn could prove political suicide. I didn't vote for him, but I thought he'd stay strong against external pressures, yet he has folded.
Yeah. And this says, talking about accents, John says, when I moved to Leicester 25 years ago, my work colleagues used to take the mick out of my Cockney accent. Then when I go to visit family in Putney, they take the mick and say, Mick, you've got a northern accent. I can't win.
That's the thing, you can't win with
can't
accents.
win.
Oh, love them or loathe them. Keep your thoughts coming in. We love to hear from you throughout the programme. Look, for now, we're actually going to say goodbye. I thought we were going to do another interview. Look, that's it from us. Andrew, it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Our first show together. Andrew's going to be with me every night until Christmas.
And tomorrow I'm going to be here with my own show for the first time at 12 noon till 3, so please tune in.
Mandatory watching, absolutely.
So.
We're going to leave you now, but we're going to leave you in the capable hands of Tom Harwood with the briefing. Have a lovely day.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGivern here with the forecast. More rain for some of us today. Brighter skies for many compared with yesterday, but there are further showers coming our way. And for the southeast, some more persistent rain because Wednesday's system, well, the low pressure at least is clearing to the north, but its lingering weather front is sticking around for some time across East Anglia and the southeast. And as a result, it's a wet start for London, East Anglia, southeast England. That rain will come and go, I think, through the day. It could cause some issues on the roads because 20, 30, perhaps 40 millimetres of rain accumulating through the day. Well, that might be troublesome. Further west, brighter skies, yes, but further showers pushing through, particularly across western parts of the UK. I think northeast Scotland faring well for sunshine and predominantly drier weather, and all areas feeling a bit cooler compared with recent days, 10 or 11 in the north and 13 or 14 further south. Now, the showers, if anything, get going a bit more during the evening and overnight, especially across parts of Wales into the southwest of England and then later across southern counties of England. Hail and thunder, always a possibility, gusty winds as well, and the risk of some, well, high rainfall totals in a short space of time across southern counties of England. Elsewhere, clearer skies are moving in, lighter winds, and as a result, Friday starts off colder compared with recent mornings. In fact, you probably have to go back to the second week of October to see a morning as cold as this. A touch of frost in places, -3 or -4 Celsius in some sheltered spots in the north. But a bright start, plenty of blue skies out there. Once any early showers have cleared from the south, there will be further showers coming in from the northwest, but actually a decent amount of sunny spells in between those showers. And it's a colder day compared with recent days. Again, you have to go back to the beginning or the second week of October, but temperatures will start to edge upwards this weekend as further areas of low pressure move in. Wet and windy on Saturday, blustery showers on Sunday, highs of 14 Celsius.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales,
and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio, and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.